London in the 1800s was a city of stark contrasts. For the wealthy, winter meant roaring fires, thick blankets, and warm meals. For the poor, it meant a daily battle against freezing temperatures, hunger, and disease. Winter in Victorian London wasn't just a season, it was a merciless test of survival that revealed the brutal divide between those who could buy warmth and those who had to fight for it. Here's what life was really like during London's brutal Victorian winters. If you fall asleep to these stories, that's what they're for. So like or subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Comment below. Love seeing listeners from Texas to Toronto to Tokyo all here at the same time. Well, not the same time. You know what I mean? Alright, tonight it's Victorian London winters, but wait, are you comfortable? No, really, check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. Your eyes open to darkness. Complete darkness. It takes a moment to realise that your eyes are actually open. The room is just that dark. The cold hits you before anything else, a bone-deep chill that somehow manages to seep through the thin patched blanket covering your body. You're not alone on the straw mattress. Your younger sister is pressed against your back and your brother's feet are tangled with yours, a necessary tangle of limbs for warmth. It's that magical body heat, not comfort, that makes it so hard to pull yourself up, not like your cozy, solitary bed right now. The single room your family calls home, all 6 of you, isn't just cold. It's colder than outdoors somehow. When you exhale, your breath forms a cloud that hangs in the air like a ghost. The frost has crept inside, painting delicate patterns on the inside of your single window. A cruel kind of beauty for those who can't afford beauty of any other kind. You sit up, your joints ache from the cold. This is the first survival test of the day, simply getting out of bed. Jamie's coughing again, your mother whispers from her corner of the room. She's already up, as always. You wonder if she ever sleeps. Her face is lined beyond her 35 years, carved by winter after winter of this same merciless cold. I spent 3 months researching Victorian winters for a history project once. The records from hospitals are basically horror novels. Cold killed more people than you'd think possible through 1,000 different paths, but cold was at the start of all of them. Your feet hit the floor and you wince. The wooden boards feel like ice. No rugs here, not in this part of London. You've heard rich people have carpets so thick you sink into them. Hard to imagine when your toes are already numb after just seconds on the bare floor. Jamie's cough rattles again. A wet, dangerous sound. Your 6-year-old brother has been fighting this cough for 2 weeks now. In summer, it might have been nothing. In winter, a cough is never nothing. We need a fire, you mutter, looking at the cold grate. The previous night's ashes are still there, a few sad cinders among the grey. Got anything to burn? Your mother asks, though she knows the answer. The first task of every winter day, find fuel, anything that will burn. The wealthy in their fine homes on the other side of the city wake to fires already burning, stoked by servants who crept in before dawn. Their coal cellars are full, their children never know what it means to be truly cold. I'll find something, you say, because what choice is there? You pull on every piece of clothing you own, which isn't much. Shirt, patched trousers, a threadbare coat that might have been blue once, but is now the universal colour of London poor. A sooty, indeterminate grey. No gloves. Those were pawned weeks ago. Your boots have holes in them, but they're better than nothing. Side note, most poor Victorian kids didn't even have shoes, like, at all. They just walked barefoot through the snow. Can you imagine? I get whiny when my socks get wet. Your mother hands you a cup of what passes for tea, mostly water with the memory of tea leaves that have been reused too many times. It's lukewarm at best, but you drink it down, anything to put something in your stomach. "Take care out there," she says. "The fog's a thick one today." Of course it is. Winter fog in Victorian London wasn't just any fog, it was a living, choking thing, what they called a pea super, yellow-grey smog so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face, coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys mixed with the natural mist rising from the Thames, creating a toxic cloud that burned the lungs and stung the eyes. You wrap a ragged scarf around your face before heading out, not for warmth, though that's a nice side effect, but to filter at least some of the poisonous air. "Wait," your sister calls. She's 9, with eyes too old for her face. She hands you a small tin cup. For coal, hope, sometimes it's all you have. You step outside and the fog swallows you whole. The narrow alley you live on has vanished into yellowish-white nothingness. You can hear London, the clatter of cartwheels, distant shouts, the clank of metal from the street sweeper somewhere nearby, but you can't see more than a few feet ahead. The cold is different out here. In your room, it was still, stagnant. Outside, it moves, finds every gap in your clothing, every inch of exposed skin. The wind funnels down the narrow alleys of your slum neighbourhood, cutting like knives. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine the coldest you've ever been, then add damp to it. London cold wasn't just about temperature. It was about the humidity that soaked into your bones. It was about fog that clung to your skin and clothes. It was a cold that didn't just touch you, it moved into you and set up home. Your first stop is always the same, the back of the bakery 3 streets over. If you're lucky, the baker might have some broken pieces of coal that fell from his delivery. Sometimes there are even burnt crusts of bread to take home. Today, you're not the only one with this idea. 3 other children are already scrabbling in the ash heap behind the shop. This is normal. Winter creates competitors of everyone. "Nothing left," a boy younger than you mutters as you approach. His face is black with soot, his fingers raw from digging, but you look anyway because you must. You dig through the ashes, ignoring the way they work into the cracks of your chapped hands, the way they sting, and there, a small lump of coal missed by the others. You pocket it quickly. It's not enough for a proper fire, but it's a start. The baker emerges from his back door, face flushed from his ovens. For a moment, the blessed heat washes over you before the door closes again. "Off with you lot," he says, but there's no real menace in it. He tosses a few burnt ends of bread onto the ground. "Share those?" In summer, this might be humiliating. In winter, it's salvation. You grab a piece, nod thanks, and move on. The crust goes into your pocket. Not for you, for Jamie. The coal was for everyone, the food is for the sick. Your next destination is the Thames. The great river that bisects London is partly frozen near the banks, though the middle still flows, dark and dangerous. But the frozen edges are a hunting ground for the desperate. Sometimes coal falls from the barges, sometimes there's driftwood, sometimes there are things that might not be meant for burning, but will burn anyway. The river is a 15-minute walk, but in the fog and cold it takes twice that. By the time you reach the Thames, your feet are numb in your leaking boots. The scene at the riverbank is something from a nightmare, or would be if it weren't so common. Dozens of people, mostly children, scrabbling along the frozen edges of the river. They're called mudlarks, these river scavengers, searching for anything of value that might wash up. In winter, that usually means fuel. You spot a familiar face. Will, a boy from 2 streets over. His father died last winter. Pneumonia, they said, though in the slums the actual disease is often just a formality. Cold and hunger are the real killers. Morning, Will calls, his voice muffled by the scarf around his face. Found anything good? Bit of coal at Baker's, you reply. You? Will holds up a piece of driftwood, waterlogged but large enough to burn. This'll dry out by tonight. Might burn for an hour. An hour of heat. It sounds like a fortune. This is the winter economy of the poor. Not pounds and shillings, but minutes of warmth, hours of survival. The ice at the river's edge creaks ominously under your feet. Every year, children fall through. Some are pulled out, some aren't. It's a risk you take because you must. As you pick your way along, eyes scanning for anything useful, you notice something dark against the dirty ice. Another lump of coal, larger than the one you found earlier. It must have fallen from a coal barge and washed to shore. You glance around, no one else has spotted it yet. You move carefully, trying not to draw attention, not out of selfishness. Your family simply needs it desperately. Just as your fingers close around it, you hear a shout. A boy about your age has spotted what you're doing. He moves toward you, face determined. I saw it first, he lies. You know how this goes. In summer, maybe you'd argue. In winter, conflict takes energy you can't spare. But then something unexpected happens. The boy stops, looks at you more closely, and recognition dawns. You're the one with the sick brother, he says. Word travels in the slums. Everyone knows everyone's business, everyone's struggles. You nod. Take it, he says, then lowers his voice. My ma says there's a coal cart that tipped over on Bridge Street, drivers waiting for help to right it, some spilled. This is how the poor survive winter, not through charity from above, but through the small kindnesses of those who have nothing to give except information. Bridge Street, you repeat. Thanks. He nods and moves on, back to his own desperate hunt. You pocket the coal and head toward Bridge Street, moving as quickly as your frozen feet will allow. The fog has lifted slightly, but the cold remains, a constant pressure on your chest. The boy was right. On Bridge Street, a coal cart has slid on the icy cobblestones and tipped. The driver and another man are trying to right it while a small crowd gathers, ostensibly to help, but really to see if they might snatch a piece or two of the spilled fuel. It's like watching hungry dogs circle a fallen piece of meat. Everyone here needs that coal. Everyone here has someone at home, cold, waiting. The policeman hasn't arrived yet. That gives everyone a small window of opportunity. You edge closer, trying to look helpful rather than desperate. The cart driver is cursing, his breath clouding in the cold air. "Give me a hand here," he calls to the gathering men. Several move forward to help push the cart upright. You see your chance. While attention is on the cart, you quickly grab 2 fist-sized pieces of coal from where they've scattered on the ground. Not enough to be obviously stealing, but enough to make a difference. You've just straightened up when you hear a shout. "Oi, you there." Your heart freezes colder than the air around you. You turn to see a constable emerging from the fog, his tall hat and blue coat materializing like an apparition. And this is where it gets complicated, because stealing coal, even coal that's spilled onto the street, that's not just frowned upon, that's a crime. And in Victorian London, crimes were punished harshly, especially when committed by the poor. "What have you got there, boy?" the constable demands, reaching for you. You're about to run, the automatic response of the poor to authority, when the cart driver intervenes. "He's helping me," the man says gruffly. "I told him he could have a piece or two for his trouble." The driver's eyes meet yours briefly. Another small kindness from a stranger. The poor looking out for the poor? Sometimes it's the only safety net that exists. The constable looks suspicious but nods curtly and turns his attention to moving the crowd along instead. "Thank you," you murmur to the driver as you help push the cart back onto its wheels. "Got family?" he asks quietly. "5 of us. Brother's sick." He nods, understanding everything that isn't said. "Take one more piece before you go. The big one there." You do, gratitude burning in your throat. 3 pieces of coal and a crust of bread. It's been a successful morning by winter standards. The walk home seems shorter despite your numbed feet and the cold that has worked its way so deep into your bones that you've almost stopped feeling it. A dangerous sign in itself. Many who stop feeling the cold never feel anything again. The fog is thickening again as you make your way through the maze of slum streets. Twice you take a wrong turn, disoriented by how the familiar has been rendered strange and ghostly by the yellow haze. The gas lamps have been lit early due to the fog, but they provide little real light, just eerie floating globes that make the fog seem even more impenetrable, more supernatural. You pass a woman selling matches huddled in a doorway. Her face is blue with cold, her fingers so stiff she can barely hold her wares. You wonder if she's sold any today. Who would stop in this weather? But she has no choice. No sales means no food, no coal, no life. "Just a penny, sir," she calls as you pass. "Keep your family warm." Your hand touches the coins in your pocket, earned last week cleaning out stables, meant for bread tomorrow. You hesitate, then drop a halfpenny into her palm. She blesses you with cracked lips. This is winter's terrible math, calculating whether you can afford both food and warmth, whether you can sacrifice a bit of one to prevent someone else from losing everything. By the time you reach home, your family is up. Your father has already left for the docks, where he'll work regardless of weather, unloading cargo in the freezing spray of the Thames. If he's lucky, he'll get work today. If not, he'll stand in line for hours in the cold, waiting for jobs that never materialize. "Look what I found," you say, showing them the coal pieces with pride. Your mother's face lights up, a rare sight in winter. "We'll have a proper fire tonight," she says, carefully setting the precious fuel aside. They'll save it for the evening when everyone is home and the cold is at its worst. Your sister has managed to get a small fire going with scraps of paper and broken bits of a wooden crate someone discarded. It's hardly a fire at all, more smoke than heat, but it's something. Jamie is sitting close to it, blanket wrapped around his thin shoulders, still coughing. You give him the crust of bread from your pocket. "Eat slow," you tell him. "Make it last." This is another winter lesson, how to stretch everything, food, fuel, strength, to its absolute limit. Outside, the church bells toll the hour, muffled by the fog. 9 o'clock. The day has barely begun, and already you've faced more challenges than most wealthy Londoners will face in a week. "You'll need to get water," your mother says, handing you a bucket. Another daily task. The communal pump in the courtyard is likely frozen again. You'll have to thaw it somehow. As you head back out into the cold, you glance up. Through a rare break in the fog, you can see the sky. A strange, milky blue that seems impossibly distant. Somewhere up there, the sun is shining. Hard to believe on days like these. A distant church bell tolls, its sound dampened by the fog. The day is only beginning, and already you've fought several battles for warmth, for food, for simple survival. But that's winter in Victorian London for the poor. It isn't just a season to endure, it's a daily war against the cold, against hunger, against death itself. And as you step back into the fog, bucket in hand, you know there are many more battles to come before this day is done. The communal water pump stands in the middle of the courtyard, surrounded by a small crowd of people with buckets and pots. As expected, it's frozen solid. An old man is pouring hot water from a kettle over the pump's handle, trying to thaw it. Steam rises in the frigid air as the crowd waits patiently. This is normal. This is winter. "Morning, Jack," you say, joining the queue. The old man nods in greeting. "Third time it's frozen today," he mutters. "Gonna be a bad one." Bad ones are relative in London winters. They're all bad. Some are just deadly instead of merely miserable. When your turn finally comes, you crank the handle and collect the precious water, which is already developing ice crystals by the time you're halfway home. Your fingers, red and swollen from cold, can barely grip the handle of the bucket. Fun fact I learned from a museum guide in London: frostbite was so common that some people's fingers would literally fall off by the end of winter, like just drop right off, and that was considered not great, but also not the worst thing that could happen to you. At least you were alive, right? Back inside, your mother takes the water and pours some into a pot that she places on the small fire. The rest she saves in a corner, where it will likely freeze again before evening. "Mrs. Bennet's boy came by," she says, stirring the pot. "Inside is a thin gruel, more water than oats, but it's something. Says the textile factory's taking on extra hands today. Big order came in. The textile factories are notorious, loud, dangerous, full of flying lint that clogs the lungs, but they pay, and in winter, that's all that matters." "I'll go," you say, already calculating. Half a day's wage might buy a loaf of bread, maybe even a bit of cheese. If you're quick, you could still make it to the market before closing and bring home something besides the usual gruel. Your mother nods, relief visible on her face. "Take your sister with you. They're hiring women too." Your sister, Emma, looks up from where she's tending to Jamie. At 12, she's already worked in half the factories in your part of London. Her small fingers are valued for delicate tasks that adult hands struggle with. "Can you manage?" she asks your mother, glancing at Jamie. "We'll be fine," your mother says, though you all know Jamie isn't fine. His cough sounds worse, and his forehead burns with fever despite the cold room. But there's no choice. You need money to survive, and money means leaving the sick to tend themselves. Emma pulls on her shawl, a threadbare thing that offers more idea of warmth than actual protection, and stands beside you, ready to face the day. "Don't forget," your mother says as you head out. "The coal is for tonight when your father gets home." As if you could forget. The 3 precious lumps of coal are the difference between comfort and misery, possibly even life and death if Jamie's fever worsens. The textile factory is a 20-minute walk through streets that have grown slightly more visible as the morning progresses. The worst of the fog has lifted, though the air remains thick with coal smoke that burns your lungs with each breath. The streets have come fully alive now. Vendors line the busier corners despite the cold, selling everything from matches to hot potatoes to questionable meat pies. Their faces are chapped red from hours in the frigid air, but they call out their wares with forced cheerfulness. Hot potatoes. Warm your hands. Fill your belly. Matches. Penny a box. Keep your fire going. Pies, hot meat pies. You pass a woman roasting chestnuts over a small brazier, the smell making your empty stomach clench painfully. The brazier serves 2 purposes: cooking her wares and keeping her from freezing to death during the long day of street selling. "We should have taken the bread crust for ourselves," Emma mutters, eyeing the chestnut seller longingly. "Jamie needs it more," you remind her, though your own hunger is a constant companion, sharper in winter when the body burns more energy just trying to stay warm. In summer, hunger is different. It's uncomfortable, but bearable. Winter hunger is an animal, clawing at your insides, demanding to be fed. The street grows more crowded as you near the factory district. Men and women hurry past, heads down against the cold, breath-forming clouds that join the general miasma hanging over the city. Many look as hungry as you feel, their faces gaunt with the particular hollowness that winter brings to the poor. "Look," Emma says suddenly, pointing. A cart has pulled up outside a shop delivering goods. As the men unload crates, one slips on the icy cobblestones and drops his load. The crate cracks open, spilling apples across the ground. You both freeze, watching. The driver curses, the shopkeeper emerges to shout, and in the confusion, several street children dart forward, grabbing apples and vanishing into the crowd. "Should we?" Emma whispers. You hesitate. Stealing is risky, but then you see the shopkeeper kick a bruised apple aside carelessly, leaving it in the gutter. "That one," you say. "It's not stealing if they've abandoned it." Emma nods and casually crosses the street. With the practiced nonchalance of the poor, she bends to adjust her shoe and palms the discarded apple in one smooth motion. By the time the shopkeeper glances her way, she's already moving on, the prize hidden in the folds of her shawl. Halfway down the next alley, she pulls it out. The apple is bruised on one side, but the rest is perfectly good. She splits it with you, and you both eat quickly, the sweet tart flesh an explosion of flavour after days of nothing but gruel and stale bread. "Don't tell Mother," you say around a mouthful. "She'll say we should have brought it home to share." Emma nods, wiping juice from her chin. "Sometimes you need strength just to make it through the day." This is another winter calculation, balancing immediate needs against family obligation. You feel a pang of guilt, but it passes. The apple will give you energy to work, to earn money for more food for everyone. Sometimes survival means making hard choices. The textile factory looms ahead, a huge brick building with narrow windows clouded by steam from within. Even from outside you can hear the thunderous clatter of the looms, a constant roar that gets into your bones. A group of people are gathered at the side entrance, the hiring door. Men and women, boys and girls, all with the same hungry look, the same threadbare clothes, the same hope for a day's wage. A foreman emerges, a thick-necked man bundled in a wool coat far better than anything the waiting workers own. He eyes the crowd with bored indifference. "Need 20, he calls out. 10 men, 5 women, 5 children. 12 hours, half pay at midday, half when you finish." There must be 40 people waiting. You elbow your way forward, pulling Emma along. Her size works against her here. The foreman wants children who can climb under the machines, clean out lint and tie broken threads, all while the looms keep thundering away. "Me and my sister," you say, putting Emma forward. "She's worked looms before. I can carry." The foreman looks Emma up and down, then nods. "You, girl, inside. You." He points at you, with the men loading wool. Emma gives your hand a quick squeeze before disappearing inside. The separation is expected. Men and women work in different sections of the factory, but still you feel a pang of worry. The textile factories are dangerous. Fingers caught in machines, hair tangled in belts, lungs filled with cotton dust. But it's work, and work means food. You join the men at the loading dock where huge bales of raw wool are being offloaded from carts. The work is simple but exhausting. Carry the bales from the carts to the sorting room. Each bale weighs nearly as much as you do, and the foreman expects 2 men to handle each one. Your partner is a weather-beaten man in his 40s with hands like cracked leather and a perpetual cough. He introduces himself as Bill. "First time here?" he asks as you both heft a bale between you. "First time this winter," you reply, already feeling the strain in your back. Bill nods. "Pace yourself. It's a long day. The work is all the more brutal because of the cold. The loading dock isn't heated. Only the rooms with the expensive machines get that luxury. Your hands, already chapped from morning scavenging, crack and bleed as the rough wool scratches against them. but the physical effort at least warms your body, sending blood flowing to limbs that have been half frozen for days. By midday, you've moved 30 bales. Your back screams with every lift, your hands are raw, and your empty stomach is a gnawing void. But when the foreman hands you your half-day pay, a few coins that represent the difference between eating and going hungry, the pain seems worth it. The workers get 30 minutes for food. Some have brought scraps from home, hard crusts, cold potatoes, the odd bit of cheese. Those who haven't, including you, head to the factory gate where vendors wait, knowing payday when they see it. You spend a precious coin on a bowl of pea soup from a woman with a cart. The soup is watery and barely warm, but it contains actual peas and a floating chunk of something that might generously be called meat. It's the best thing you've tasted in days. As you eat, standing in the shelter of a doorway to avoid the worst of the wind, you scan the street for Emma. The women and children eat separately, and you've saved a copper to buy her something too. You spot her finally, huddled with a group of young girls, sharing what looks like a meat pie between them. Her face is grey with exhaustion, and there's a smudge of blood on her sleeve. A minor injury, hopefully, but she's eating, and that's what matters. When the whistle blows for return to work, you feel marginally better. The soup sits warm in your belly, and the coins for the second half of the day are a comforting weight in your pocket. The afternoon work is harder. Your muscles, already taxed, scream with each new bale. The cold seems to have penetrated deeper, and even the constant movement doesn't keep it at bay. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air of the loading dock, and your sweat freezes on your skin in a bizarre combination of overheating and freezing simultaneously. Bill, your work partner, seems to be struggling too. His cough has worsened throughout the day, and by mid-afternoon he's stopping every few minutes to hack painfully, bringing up phlegm that he spits onto the already filthy floor. "Factory lung," he explains during one such break, seeing your concern. "Got it my first winter in the mills. Never goes away, just gets worse every year." You've heard of it before. The textile workers call it bicinosis, or brown lung, caused by years of breathing in lint and dust from cotton, flax and hemp. In winter, when the factories are sealed tight against the cold, the air inside becomes a thick soup of fibres that coat the lungs like wet cement. "How long have you worked in textiles?" you ask, helping him lift another bale. 20 years, give or take, Bill replies. "Started when I was younger than you, back when a man could still save a bit, maybe move up to better work eventually." He laughs, the sound dissolving into another cough. "That's all done now. Once the lung gets you, no one wants to hire you for better jobs. You stay where you are until you can't work at all. Then you die." He says it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. This is simply the reality for working poor in Victorian London, a slow deterioration in jobs that destroy the body, with no safety net when health finally fails. "You're young," Bill adds, studying your face. "Get out of textiles if you can. Find something else." As if jobs are just lying around waiting to be claimed, as if winter offers choices. You just nod and keep working. Survival first. Dreams of better work can come after the immediate threat of freezing or starving has passed. By 4 o'clock, the winter sun is already setting, though it's hard to tell through the perpetual grey haze hanging over London. The gas lamps in the streets are being lit, their weak glow creating islands of light in the gathering darkness. Inside the factory, the lamps have been lit for hours. The loading dock where you work is the least illuminated area. No sense wasting expensive lamp oil where only heavy labour happens. You and the other men work in a grey twilight that makes the already dangerous job of moving heavy bales even more treacherous. It happens in an instant. Bill stumbles on a patch of ice near the dock edge. The bale shifts, throwing you off balance too. For a terrifying moment, the massive weight pulls you toward the edge, where a 15-foot drop awaits. Then other hands grab the bale, steadying it, stopping your fall. "Watch yourselves," the foreman shouts from his supervisory position by the door where he's been keeping warm all day. Bill's face is ashen as he regains his footing. "Too close," he mutters. "Sorry about that, lad." You nod, heart still pounding. A fall like that could mean broken bones, which means no work, which means no money for coal or food. In winter, an injury isn't just painful. It's potentially fatal for your entire family who depends on your income. Wait, sorry, this sounds a bit dramatic, right? Like I'm exaggerating, but I interviewed an actual historian about this, and she confirmed that even a simple broken leg in winter could spiral into a family's complete financial ruin, and sometimes even death. There was no sick leave, no workers' compensation, no social safety net at all. If you couldn't work, you didn't eat. Period. By the time the final whistle blows at 6 o'clock, you're dead on your feet. Every muscle screams, your hands are raw and bleeding in several places, and the cold has worked so deep into your bones that you can't imagine ever being truly warm again. But you have your pay, a handful of coins that represent heat and food for your family. As the workers stream out of the factory gates, you wait near the women's exit for Emma. She emerges with a group of girls, all of them looking as exhausted as you feel. Her face is pale except for 2 bright spots of colour on her cheeks. Not health, but the flush of overwork in a room that's alternately too hot from the steam of the machines and too cold from drafts through poorly sealed windows. "How was it?" you ask, falling into step beside her. "They put me on the cleaning crew," she says, holding up her hands. Her fingers are raw, nails torn, crawling under the looms while they're still running to clear out the lint. "Jenny, a girl I was working with, got her hair caught in one of the belts. They had to cut it off to free her. She was lucky it wasn't her scalp." You've heard worse stories from the textile factories. Children losing fingers, hands, sometimes even their lives to the relentless machines. Emma's torn nails and exhaustion seem a small price in comparison. "Did they pay you fairly?" you ask. She nods, showing you her coins. "Not as much as you earned, of course. Women and children always earn less, regardless of how dangerous or difficult their work, but still a decent amount for a day's labour. Together, you have enough for a real meal tonight, with some left over for tomorrow's bread. Combined with the coal you found this morning, it feels like a small victory against the winter. The streets are fully dark now, lit only by the weak glow of gas lamps that create pools of yellowy light every 20 yards or so. Between these islands of illumination are stretches of almost complete darkness, made all the more impenetrable by the fog that has settled again, thick and choking. The walk home is nerve-wracking. Winter nights in London are dangerous in ways that go beyond the cold. Footpads and pickpockets prey on workers on payday, knowing that even the poorest labourer will be carrying at least a few coins after work. You and Emma walk quickly, staying in the lamplight when possible, taking the most populated routes despite the longer distance. Safety in numbers is more than a saying in winter London. It's a survival strategy. "Should we get something to eat now?" Emma asks as you pass a vendor selling hot eels, the steam from his cart creating a fragrant cloud in the cold air. The smell makes your stomach growl painfully. After a day of heavy labour, your body is desperate for more sustenance than the midday soup provided. But you shake your head. "Better to buy something we can share with everyone," you say. "There's a chandler's shop on the corner that sells cheap cuts. Maybe we can get a bit of bacon for the gruel." Emma nods, though you can see the longing in her eyes as you pass the eel seller. Hot food now versus better food for all later, another of winter's cruel calculations. The chandler's shop is still open, a common practice in working-class neighbourhoods where customers can only shop after their workday ends. Inside, the smell of tallow candles mixes with that of the various foodstuffs hanging from hooks or stored in barrels. Saltfish, cheese rinds, bacon, and miscellaneous goods that all but the poorest can afford. You spend your coins carefully: a small piece of bacon, a half-pound of oats, a precious ounce of tea leaves, real ones, not the twice-used leaves you've been making do with. These small luxuries feel enormous after weeks of near-starvation rations. "We're eating like kings tonight," Emma says with a grin as you leave the shop, your purchases wrapped in paper and clutched tightly. The final stretch home feels less threatening with food in hand and most of your pay still secure in your deepest pocket. The neighbourhood grows shabbier as you approach your tenement, the buildings leaning drunkenly against each other, the streets narrower and darker, with fewer gas lamps to light the way. The smell hits you before you even enter your street, a mix of human waste from overflowing cesspits, smoke from hundreds of small fires burning whatever fuel people can find, and the general miasma of too many bodies living in too little space with too little opportunity to wash. In summer, this smell is overpowering, sickening. In winter, oddly, it's almost welcome, the smell of life continuing despite everything, of human resilience in the face of nature's cruelty and society's indifference. Your building looms ahead, a crumbling 5-story tenement that houses 30 families in spaces designed for 10. The stairs creak ominously as you climb to your 3rd-floor room, the wood rotted in places from persistent damp. Outside your door, you pause. Inside, you can hear Jamie coughing, that same wet, rattling sound that's been growing worse for days. But you can also hear something else, your father's voice, low and rumbling. He's home early, which means either good luck or very bad luck at the docks. You push open the door, the precious food clutched in your hand, unsure whether you're about to face celebration or crisis. Inside, the room is warmer than when you left. Not comfortable by any normal standard, but noticeably less frigid. The small fire from this morning has been built up with what looks like pieces of a broken wooden crate. The precious coal remains untouched in the corner. Your father sits by the fire, his massive frame seeming too large for the tiny room. His clothes are damp, his face haggard with exhaustion, but he smiles when you and Emma enter. "There they are," he says, his voice rough from years of shouting over dockyard noise. "My working children. Your mother is stirring something in the pot over the fire. Just water and a few vegetables, but it smells wonderful after a day of labour." "Pa, you're home early," Emma says, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Your father's expression shifts, something flashing behind his eyes. Dock foreman cut the day short. Not enough ships coming in with the river partly frozen. He shrugs, aiming for casual, but not quite hitting it. Half day's wage is better than nothing. You recognise the lie immediately. If he'd received even half pay, he'd have stopped at the pub on the way home, not out of vice, but necessity. The dock workers practically live on beer in winter. It provides calories and temporary warmth when food is scarce. His early return, completely sober, means something worse happened. Your mother catches your eye and gives a tiny shake of her head. "Don't ask. Not now." Instead, you hold up the package from the chandlers. "We got bacon and real tea." The mood in the room shifts instantly. Your mother's face lights up. Jamie stops coughing long enough to look interested, and even your father's troubled expression eases. "Let me see that," your mother says, taking the package and unwrapping it with the care usually reserved for precious jewels. She holds up the small slab of bacon like it's a religious artifact, and in a way it is, a symbol of temporary salvation from hunger. "We'll feast tonight," she declares, already cutting a thin slice to add to the pot. This is how winter happiness works for the poor. Small victories celebrated with disproportionate joy because they represent survival itself, while your mother prepares the meal, adding the oats to thicken the soup and the bacon to flavour it. You sit beside Jamie. His forehead burns against your hand, but his eyes seem clearer than this morning. "Did you really work in the factory?" he whispers, his voice hoarse from coughing. "The big textile one on Commercial Road," you confirm. "Carried wool bales all day." His eyes widen. To a sick 6-year-old, this sounds like an adventure rather than the brutal labour it was. "When I'm bigger, I'll work too," he declares. "When you're better," you correct gently. "First you need to get well." The truth you don't say. If he survives this winter, he'll be working alongside you by next year. Childhood in the slums is brutally short. Your father has been watching this exchange, his face unreadable. Now he stands, wincing slightly as he straightens his back. "Need to fetch more water," he announces, picking up the bucket. "I can go," you offer, already rising. You've done your share of work today, but your father looks exhausted beyond measure. He shakes his head. "Need the air," he says, and you understand. He needs a moment alone, away from the worried eyes of his family. After he leaves, your mother moves to sit beside you and Emma. "Your father's hand was crushed between crates this morning," she says quietly. "Not broken," and the doctor says, "but badly bruised. Won't be able to work for at least a week." She swallows hard. "They gave him nothing for the lost time. Said he was lucky they didn't charge him for the doctor." The implications sink in like a stone. A week without your father's wages, in the dead of winter, with Jamie sick, even with you and Emma working, it won't be enough to feed 5 people and keep the fire going. "I'll find more work," you say, automatically. "Morning shifts at the factory, afternoon shifts somewhere else?" Your mother's face softens. She touches your cheek with a rough, work-worn hand. "You're a good child," she says, "but you can't work yourself to death either. We'll manage. We always do. The family prayer of the poor. We'll manage. We always do. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not." By the time your father returns with the water, the soup is ready, a thin gruel made marginally more substantial by the oats and flavoured with the precious bacon. Your mother has even brewed a pot of the real tea, its rich aroma filling the small room. You eat sitting on the floor around the fire, savouring each spoonful of the soup, making it last. The bacon adds a saltiness that seems miraculous after weeks of bland gruel, and the tea, when passed around in the family's single chipped cup, tastes like liquid heaven. For a brief moment, the relentless cold and the constant worry recede. This is another winter miracle, finding moments of joy in the smallest pleasures, in simply being together, alive, with full bellies and warm hands. After the meal, your father examines your day's wages and Emma's, combining them with the few coins he already had. "Should get us through a few days," he says, carefully storing the money in the battered tin box hidden beneath a loose floorboard. "And we've still got the coal for when it gets really cold." The temperature outside is already well below freezing, the kind of cold that kills the elderly and the very young in unheated rooms. But really cold is relative when you've lived through London winters. It can always get worse. Jamie's coughing has eased a bit after the hot meal, but his fever still burns. Your mother tucks him into the shared bed, piling the family's meagre collection of blankets around him. "I'll take first watch," she says, settling beside him. "Someone needs to stay awake to make sure his breathing doesn't worsen in the night, to keep the small fire going as long as the fuel lasts. You, Emma, and your father will sleep in shifts on the floor near the fireplace, maximizing the benefit from the dying embers. This is normal winter sleeping arrangements. The sickest get the bed, everyone else makes do." Despite the exhaustion of the day's labour, sleep doesn't come easily. The floor is hard, the thin blanket barely keeps the chill at bay, and your muscles ache from carrying wool bales. Around midnight, your mother wakes you for your shift watching Jamie. "His fever's a bit lower," she murmurs, sliding onto the floor where you had been lying. "Wake me if his breathing changes." You sit beside Jamie on the bed, listening to the rattle in his chest. Outside, the wind howls down the narrow street, finding every crack in the poorly sealed window, sending drafts skittering across the floor. The fire has burned down to almost nothing, just a few glowing embers that give more psychological comfort than actual warmth. London at night in winter is never fully quiet. Even at this late hour you can hear coughing from neighbouring rooms, the cry of a hungry baby, the occasional shout or breaking glass from the pub at the corner, the sounds of poverty, of desperation, of life continuing despite everything. Jamie stirs, his eyes fluttering open. "Tell me a story," he whispers, his voice rough from coughing. You smile in the darkness. "What kind of story?" "One about summer," he says simply. So you tell him about last summer, when you took him to the Commons on a rare day off, how the sun felt on your faces, how you both ran barefoot through the grass, how you caught minnows in the stream with your hands. Small joys that cost nothing but seem like impossible luxuries in the grip of winter. Jamie falls asleep halfway through the story, his breathing slightly easier, his forehead cooler under your hand. A good sign. Children die so easily in winter, from cold, from hunger, from 100 diseases that prey on the weakened, that each improvement feels like a victory against death itself. The rest of the night passes in the half-sleep of the chronically cold, never fully unconscious, always aware of the chill creeping deeper into your bones. By dawn, the room is freezing again, the fire completely out, frost patterns forming on the inside of the window. Your father rises first, moving stiffly, his injured hand held carefully at his side. Without speaking, he begins the morning ritual of trying to coax life into the fireplace using scraps of paper and the smallest splinters of wood salvaged from yesterday's crate. "I'll find more fuel today," you promise, knowing that without your father's income, the burden of keeping the family warm falls more heavily on your shoulders. He nods, his face grim. "Market might have work," he suggests. "They always need porters. Even with a bad hand, I could manage light loads." The desperation in his voice is painful to hear. A dock worker for 20 years, reduced to begging for the lowest jobs because of an injury that wasn't his fault. This is the precariousness of winter existence. One accident, one illness, one stroke of bad luck, and the thin margin between survival and disaster vanishes. Breakfast is a cup of water and the last heel of yesterday's bread, carefully divided 5 ways. The rich tea and satisfying soup of last night already seem like a distant memory, a brief moment of abundance in the endless struggle to keep hunger at bay. "I'll try the factory again," you say, pulling on your coat. "Emma too." Your mother nods but adds, "If the textile mill isn't hiring, try the bakeries. They sometimes need delivery boys. Anything to keep moving in this cold." This is established winter wisdom. Keep moving or freeze. It's why even the most menial job is better than none at all in January. Activity generates heat. Heat means survival. Outside, the morning is brutally cold but clearer than yesterday. The fog has temporarily lifted, revealing a London transformed by frost. Every surface glitters with ice crystals. Every breath hangs in the air like a small cloud. It would be beautiful if it weren't so deadly. The textile factory is your first stop, but a sign on the gate delivers bad news. No hiring today. A small crowd of desperate workers stands outside anyway, hoping the sign is wrong or that someone hired won't show up. You consider joining them, but the odds seem poor. Better to try elsewhere than waste precious hours in a futile wait. Let's try the market, Emma suggests. If Pa's right, they might need both of us. Covent Garden Market is a long walk from your slum neighbourhood, but it's one of the few places that hires daily workers year-round. Food must move regardless of weather, and human labour is cheaper than horses when the streets are icy. The walk takes nearly an hour, your empty stomach already gnawing with hunger, fingers and toes numb despite constant movement. Emma trudges beside you, her face nearly hidden in her threadbare scarf, only her eyes visible, red-rimmed from the cold and smoke but determined. The market is a chaos of activity when you arrive. Carts and wagons jockey for position on the icy cobblestones, porters stagger under enormous loads of vegetables and fruits, sellers shout their wares to the bundled shoppers hurrying through the cold. In summer, the market smells of earth and greenery, of ripe fruit and fresh flowers. In winter, the smells are more subdued. Root vegetables, cabbages, the occasional whiff of citrus from imported oranges that only the wealthy can afford. The hiring corner is crowded with men and boys like you, stamping their feet against the cold, breath clouding as they call out their availability to passing merchants. Strong back here. Experienced porter, sir. Can carry all day, ma'am. It's a desperate chorus. A winter song of poverty. You join in, pushing yourself forward when you see a merchant looking around for workers. I can carry, sir. My sister too. She's stronger than she looks. Some ignore you. Some shake their heads. Too young, too small, not worth the pennies even at winter's desperate wages. But finally, a red-faced man selling potatoes beckons you over. Need these moved to my stall, he says, pointing to a wagon piled with sacks. Penny a sack. And there's 20. Can be split between you if you're quick about it. 20 pennies for perhaps an hour's work. Not as good as the factory, but better than nothing. You nod eagerly, and Emma is already moving toward the wagon. The sacks are heavy, 50 pounds at least, and the potato seller's stall is on the far side of the market. But you work quickly, efficiently, knowing that speed means the possibility of more work afterward. Emma takes the smaller sacks, you the larger ones, and between you, the job is finished in under an hour. The potato seller counts out the pennies grudgingly, as though parting with each coin causes him physical pain, but he also gives you each a small potato. Damaged ones can't sell them, which you pocket gratefully. Food and money, a double victory. The potato seller must spread word that you're reliable, because another merchant hires you immediately after. A woman selling winter greens who needs her stall reorganized and fresh stock brought from her storage cellar. By midday, you and Emma have earned nearly as much as you would have at the factory, plus accumulated several damaged items of food. The potatoes, a slightly wilted cabbage, an apple with a bruised spot, a feast by winter standards. The market operates differently in winter. Summer brings abundance, variety, colour. Winter is all about survival foods: potatoes, turnips, cabbages, onions, things that store well, that provide calories to burn against the cold, that can be stretched into soups and stews to feed many with little. During a brief break between jobs, you and Emma wander through the market, not shopping. You can't afford most of what's for sale, but absorbing the sensory experience, the relative warmth of bodies packed together, the calls of the sellers, the occasional luxury that seems almost mythical in your world. A pineapple from the colonies, hothouse flowers, a rabbit already skinned and ready for a rich person's pot. Oysters get your oysters. The call catches your attention. Oysters are one of London's strange winter paradoxes. Expensive in fine restaurants but cheap street food for the poor. The oyster seller has set up near the market's edge, a rough wooden tray filled with ice and shellfish in front of him. "Halfpenny for 3, he calls. "Freshest in London." You hesitate, weighing the coins in your pocket against the family's needs. Oysters are good food, filling, nutritious, a rare protein the poor can sometimes afford, but every halfpenny spent here is one not spent on coal or bread or medicine for Jamie. Emma makes the decision, pulling out a halfpenny before you can object. "We've earned a treat," she says firmly, "and we'll still bring plenty home." The oyster seller grins, revealing several missing teeth, and selects 3 oysters. With practiced efficiency, he shucks them, hands them over on a piece of seaweed, then sprinkles them with a bit of vinegar from a cruet. "Get 'em while they're cold," he quips, already turning to the next customer. You and Emma stand to one side, out of the main flow of market traffic, and eat the oysters quickly. The taste is briny, the texture slippery and strange, but the feeling of protein hitting your empty stomach is immediate and wonderful. Emma closes her eyes briefly as she swallows hers, a look of pure satisfaction on her face. "Worth it," she declares, and you have to agree. Sometimes survival means small indulgences to keep the spirit alive. The market work continues through the afternoon. More carrying, some sweeping of stalls, helping a butter seller chip the ice from her display. The physical labour keeps you warm despite the dropping temperature, and by 3 o'clock your pockets are satisfyingly heavy with coins. "We should head home," you say, noticing the light already fading. Winter days are cruelly short, and you don't want to be caught in darkness on the long walk back. Emma nods, but suggests, "Let's go by the river. Sometimes the coal barges spill when they're unloading, might find something to burn." It's a detour, but a potentially valuable one. You agree, and together you leave the relative warmth and light of the market for the darker streets leading toward the Thames. The temperature seems to drop with each street you pass, the wind growing stronger as you approach the river. The buildings here are warehouses mostly, tall and imposing, creating wind tunnels that cut through clothing like knives. By the time you reach the Thames embankment, the light is nearly gone. The river itself is a dark presence, flowing sluggishly between partially frozen banks. Ice floes drift in the current, grinding against each other with strange creaking sounds that echo across the water. By the time you reach the Thames embankment, the light is nearly gone. The river itself is a dark presence, flowing sluggishly between partially frozen banks. Ice floes drift in the current, grinding against each other with strange creaking sounds that echo across the water. This part of the river is industrial. Coal barges, cargo ships, the constant loading and unloading that keeps London fed and heated. In summer, it's bustling, chaotic. In winter, especially as evening approaches, it's eerily quiet, with reduced crews working quickly to finish before full darkness falls. You and Emma walk along the embankment, eyes scanning for anything useful: spilled coal, dropped cargo, even pieces of wood that might burn. The footing is treacherous, ice covering everything, and you have to move carefully to avoid slipping into the freezing water. "There," Emma says suddenly, pointing to a dark patch on the ice near the water's edge. "That looks like coal." She's right. A small pile of coal pieces has spilled during unloading, too little for the barge workers to bother recovering, especially as it's fallen onto the ice rather than the dock itself. "Be careful," you warn as Emma inches toward it. The ice near the river's edge is unpredictable, sometimes thick enough to support weight, sometimes dangerously thin. She nods, testing each step. You follow close behind, ready to grab her if the ice cracks. It's risky, but the reward, actual coal, enough to last several days, makes the danger worthwhile. Just as Emma reaches the small pile, a shout comes from further down the embankment. A dock policeman has spotted you. "Oi, you there? That's Thames Company property?" The absurdity almost makes you laugh, as if a few spilled pieces of coal are worth anything to the massive shipping companies. But theft is theft in the eyes of the law, and the poor have few rights when it comes to salvaging what the rich have discarded. "Run," you mutter to Emma, who has already grabbed several pieces of coal and stuffed them in her pockets. You both scramble back from the river's edge, the policeman's heavy footsteps crunching on the ice behind you. Emma slips once, nearly falling, but you catch her arm and pull her along. The coal in her pockets clinks as she runs. The winter darkness is your ally now. Within moments you've disappeared into the maze of narrow lanes leading away from the river. You duck into a recessed doorway, pulling Emma with you, both of you pressing against the wall as the policeman lumbers past, still shouting but clearly having lost your trail. When his footsteps fade, you both collapse against each other, half laughing, half gasping for breath in the frigid air. "Got it," Emma says triumphantly, pulling the coal pieces from her pockets. 6 good-sized lumps, enough for several days of meagre fires. "Worth the chase, I'd say," you nod, still catching your breath. "Ma will be pleased. This is winter survival for London's poor. Risk versus reward. Danger versus necessity. The constant calculation of what chances are worth taking to stave off cold and hunger for one more day." The walk home is tense at first, both of you watching for the policeman, but as you put distance between yourselves and the river, the tension eases. The coins in your pocket and the coal in Emma's create a warm feeling of accomplishment that almost overcomes the physical cold seeping through your inadequate clothing. The fog is returning as night falls, thick tendrils of it curling around street lamps, muffling sounds, transforming the familiar streets into something ghostly and unnerving. Somewhere distant, a church bell tolls the hour, 5 o'clock, and full darkness has descended. Emma moves closer to you as you walk, not from fear but for warmth and reassurance. Despite being 3 years younger, she has always been the braver one, but even she finds the winter fog unsettling. "Do you think Jamie will be better tonight?" she asks, her voice small in the muffling fog. "I think so," you say, hoping it's true. "He seemed cooler this morning, and we'll have good food to bring home, and coal for the fire. That helps more than any medicine." This isn't entirely accurate. Proper medicine would help more, but it's a luxury far beyond your means. For the poor, good food and warmth are the only medicines regularly available. As you turn onto your street, the familiar sights and smells of home greet you. The crooked lamppost that casts shadows like grasping fingers, the reek from the open sewer that runs along the side of the road, the sounds of too many lives packed too closely together. Home, not comfortable, not safe, certainly not healthy, but still home. You and Emma climb the creaking stairs to your room, both already imagining the family's reaction to your day's earnings and the precious coal. Small victories, but in winter, these small victories are everything. Outside your door, you pause, suddenly aware of raised voices inside. Your mother's, higher than usual with distress, and a stranger's, male and authoritative. Your father's is conspicuously absent. You exchange a worried glance with Emma, then push the door open, stepping into a scene that makes your heart sink to your frozen feet. Inside your room, a gentleman stands by the fire, if the sad collection of embers can be called a fire at all. He wears a black coat of good wool, a top hat held in gloved hands, and an expression of distaste barely concealed beneath a mask of professional concern. A parish doctor. You recognise the type immediately. They visit the slums occasionally, usually after an outbreak has grown too large to ignore, or when a particularly interesting case of disease presents itself. Your mother stands between the doctor and Jamie, who lies in bed, his coughing worse than when you left this morning. Your father is nowhere to be seen. As I was explaining to your mother, the doctor says, turning to you and Emma without introduction, the boy shows signs of bronchial inflammation, possibly pneumonia. He requires proper care. The way he says proper care makes it clear he doesn't believe such a thing possible in your home. And he's not entirely wrong. Proper care means clean air, nourishing food, adequate heat, all luxuries beyond your reach. We're caring for him, your mother says, her voice tight with restrained anger. We've managed before without interference. The doctor sighs, a sound of practiced patience wearing thin. Mrs. Clark, the parish has responsibilities. With the current mortality rates among children in this district, we cannot simply look away. The workhouse infirmary, no. Your mother's voice is steel now. He's not going to the workhouse. None of us are. You understand her fear instantly. The workhouse infirmary might offer medical care, but at a terrible price. Families were separated, forced to work for their keep despite illness, and treated with institutional cruelty disguised as charity. Many who entered the workhouse, even the infirmary, never came out again. The doctor glances at you and Emma, taking in your frost-nipped faces, your threadbare clothes, the coal dust still on Emma's hands. His gaze lingers on the small bundle of food you're still holding. I see the children are working, he observes with a hint of disapproval, though whether at child labour or your family's need for it isn't clear. Nevertheless, your youngest requires better conditions than this. He gestures vaguely at the room. The damp walls, the nearly dead fire, the single bed for 5 people. We have coal, Emma blurts out, pulling the pieces from her pocket. And food. We earned good money today. The doctor's expression softens marginally. That's commendable. But pneumonia requires consistent warmth, clean air, proper medication. What medication would help him, you ask, thinking of the coins in your pocket? Perhaps there's something affordable, something you could sacrifice for. The doctor hesitates, professional instinct warring with practical reality. Camphor for the chest, beef tea for strength, perhaps a mustard plaster, but without consistent heat. He doesn't need to finish the sentence. Heat is the one medicine that matters most, and it's the hardest to maintain. We'll keep him warm, your mother promises. The children brought coal, and my husband... Yes, where is Mr. Clark? The doctor interrupts. I was told he was injured. He's gone to the apothecary, your mother lies smoothly. For camphor, as you suggested. Another lie to protect family pride. Your father has likely gone to pawn something, whatever small items of value might remain after months of winter privation. The copper kettle, perhaps, the single good shirt he wears to better jobs. The doctor looks unconvinced, but apparently decides this battle isn't worth fighting. He reaches into his bag and removes a small bottle. Or laudanum, he says, handing it to your mother. 3 drops in water when the coughing is worst. No more than twice daily. He pauses. It's from my personal supply. There's no charge. This small kindness, unexpected from his earlier manner, seems to crack something in your mother's rigid stance. Thank you, doctor, she says, her voice softer. I'll return in 3 days, he says, replacing his hat. If he's not improved, we will need to discuss the infirmary again. His eyes sweep the room once more. And for God's sake, keep that fire going. After he leaves, your mother sinks onto the edge of the bed, the laudanum bottle clutched in her hand like a talisman. Nosy old, she mutters, but there's no real venom in it. Even unwelcome help is still help in winter. Where's Pa really gone? Emma asks, already building up the fire with the precious coal pieces. Trying to get an advance from his dock foreman, your mother sighs. Though I told him it's hopeless, they never give advances, especially not to injured men who can't work. You empty your pockets, laying out the day's earnings on the small table. We did well today, you say, trying to inject optimism into the heavy atmosphere. And there'll be work tomorrow too. The market supervisor said to come back. Your mother manages a smile, though it doesn't reach her eyes. You're good children, she says, echoing her words from last night. Too good for this life. While Emma prepares a simple meal from your market gleanings, the potatoes roasted in the now decent fire, the cabbage shredded into a pot of water to make a thin soup, you sit beside Jamie. His breathing is laboured, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a rattling sound that seems too large for his small chest. Hey Jamie boy, you say, using the nickname from better days, look what I brought. You pull the apple from your pocket, bruised but still good, and cut a small slice with your pocket knife. Jamie's eyes light up at the rare treat. Winter fruit is an almost unimaginable luxury. Just a bit at a time, you caution as he reaches for it. Make it last. The coal fire has brought the room to a temperature that could generously be called less cold, and the smell of cooking food has transformed the space from desperate to merely poor. These small improvements feel enormous after the day's labours. Your father returns as darkness falls completely, his expression telling the story before he speaks. No advance, he confirms, unwrapping his muffler. His breath smells of gin. Just a glass by the odour, not enough to count as drinking, but enough to ward off the cold and disappointment. But I got something for the boy. From his pocket he produces a small packet of Horhang candy. The old remedy for coughs isn't real medicine, but it helps ease the throat, and the sugar provides quick energy that Jamie's sick body needs. Cost my last pennies, he admits quietly to you when Jamie is distracted by the treat. Couldn't come home with nothing though. A man needs to provide. The pride and shame warring in his face are painful to see. You clasp his shoulder briefly, a man's gesture to another man, though you're barely 14. We're managing, you tell him. We always do. The family prayer passed from child to parent this time. Evening brings its own rituals of survival. The single candle is lit, not for light, which is an unaffordable luxury, but to check Jamie's condition and serve the simple meal. The rest of the night will pass in firelight and darkness. The food, meagre as it is, raises everyone's spirits. Jamie manages a few bites of potato and sips of cabbage water before falling back into restless sleep. Your father eats quickly, efficiently, a working man's approach to food as fuel rather than pleasure. Your mother takes less than her share, a habitual sacrifice you've seen so often you've almost stopped noticing it. After the meal, a knock at the door startles everyone. Visitors after dark are rare, usually neighbours with emergencies, or sometimes the landlord demanding overdue rent. Your father opens it cautiously to reveal Mrs. Higgins from next door, a widow with 3 small children of her own. "Sorry to bother," she says, her voice hushed, "but I heard the doctor was here, for your boy." The concern in her tone is genuine. In the slums, neighbours watch out for each other from necessity. Today's crisis at one door could be tomorrow's at another. "Just a chest cold," your mother says dismissively, though everyone knows it's worse. "He's resting now." Mrs. Higgins nods, understanding the pride that prevents full disclosure. "My Tom had something similar last winter," she says. "I found this helped." She holds out a small cloth pouch, onions and camphor. Hang it near his pillow at night. These small exchanges of folk medicine and practical wisdom are how the poor survive when doctors are unreachable or unhelpful. Every family has their remedies, passed down through generations, traded like currency in times of need. Your mother accepts the pouch gratefully. "You're kind to think of us." "We must look out for each other," Mrs. Higgins replies with a shrug. "No one else will." This simple truth hangs in the air after she leaves. The rich have doctors, hospitals, medicine. The poor have each other, home remedies and stubborn endurance. The evening deepens into night. Your father mends a hole in one of his work boots by firelight, squinting in the dim glow. Your mother hangs Mrs. Higgins's remedy pouch near Jamie's pillow, then sits beside him, smoothing his hair as he restlessly sleeps. You and Emma take the opportunity to wash as best you can with the small amount of water that can be spared for non-drinking purposes. Just faces and hands, standing as close to the fire as possible to avoid the shock of cold water on already chilled skin. Real bathing is a summer luxury. In winter, cleanliness is sacrificed to practicality and survival. Okay, so this might sound gross to you in your warm, clean bed right now, but for real, Victorian Londoners barely bathed in winter. The water was freezing, fuel to heat it was expensive, and many people genuinely believed that bathing opened the pores and let disease in. I know, wild. But they weren't completely wrong. If you bathed then had to put the same dirty clothes back on in an unheated room, you'd probably get sick faster. The night brings a new set of challenges. The fire must be maintained but rationed. Burning too fast means freezing before dawn, but too small a flame won't keep the deadly cold at bay. Your family has developed a rotation, each person responsible for feeding the fire during different hours, allowing the others to sleep. Your shift comes after midnight. The room is quiet except for the occasional crack from the fire and Jamie's laboured breathing. Outside, the sounds of London at night filter through the thin walls. A drunk singing somewhere in the distance, the clatter of a late cab on cobblestones, a shout followed by running footsteps. The city never truly sleeps, not even in winter's grip. There's always someone working, drinking, fighting, loving, dying. You add a small piece of coal to the fire, watching the flames leap up to embrace it. Fire is life in winter, mesmerizing, necessary, dangerous. Too little means freezing, too much means burning. Just right means one more night of survival. A soft moan from Jamie draws your attention. You move to his side, feeling his forehead. The fever seems worse again, his skin hot and dry beneath your palm. Following your mother's earlier example, you dampen a rag with precious water and lay it across his forehead. cold," he mumbles, without waking fully. "I know," you whisper, "but it helps the fever." He doesn't respond, drifting back into deeper sleep. You replace the damp cloth several times, hoping to bring the fever down before morning. The laudanum bottle sits on the small table, an option of last resort if his coughing worsens. By the time your watch ends, frost is forming again on the inside of the window despite the fire. Outside, the temperature must be well below freezing. You wonder how the truly homeless are surviving tonight, those who sleep in doorways or under bridges, those with not even your family's meagre shelter and warmth. Many won't survive. That's the brutal reality of London winters. Every morning, bodies are found frozen in alleys, under bridges, in parks. The poorest of the poor, defeated finally by cold and hunger. Your mother wakes for her shift, tending the fire, moving quietly to avoid disturbing the others. "His fever's up," you whisper, nodding toward Jamie. She nods, touches his forehead and sighs. "If it's not better by morning, we'll try the laudanum," she decides. "Now get some sleep while you can. Tomorrow will be another long day." Sleep comes in fragments, never deep enough to fully rest, but better than nothing. You dream of summer, of warm days and enough food, of a world where winter isn't a season of constant fear. Morning arrives with weak grey light filtering through the frosted window. Your father is already up, rebuilding the fire that has died down overnight. Your mother sits beside Jamie, her face tight with worry. "He's worse," she says simply when she sees you're awake. "The fever broke in the night, but his breathing..." Even across the room you can hear it, a wet, rattling sound with every breath as though he's drowning from within. This is how pneumonia kills, fluid filling the lungs until breathing becomes impossible. "I'll fetch the doctor," you decide immediately, already pulling on your coat. "We can't pay him," your father reminds you, his voice rough with sleep and worry. "He said he'd come back in 3 days. I'll just make it sooner." The unspoken understanding passes between you. You'll beg if necessary, promise anything to get help for Jamie. Pride means nothing when a child's life hangs in the balance. Outside, the morning is clear and brutally cold. The temporary break in the fog reveals a London transformed by overnight frost. Every surface glitters with ice crystals, beautiful and deadly. Your breath freezes almost instantly, forming crystals on your muffler. The parish doctor's office is a mile away, near the church that nominally cares for the souls of your district while mostly ignoring the bodies. The walk there is painful, the cold finding every gap in your clothing, your feet already numb in their inadequate boots. The streets are beginning to fill with early morning workers, factory hands hurrying to arrive before the whistles blow, servants going to light fires in wealthy homes, costermongers setting up their stalls for the day's trade. Everyone moves quickly, heads down against the cold, focused on reaching their destination and the relative warmth it might provide. A milk cart passes, the horse's breath forming clouds in the frigid air, its hooves striking sparks from the frozen cobblestones. The driver is wrapped in so many layers he looks twice his actual size, only his reddened nose visible between scarf and hat. "Cold enough for ya?" he calls as he passes, the standard winter greeting between strangers. "Getting there," you reply with the standard answer. These small interactions are part of London's winter culture, acknowledging the shared suffering of the cold, the communal endurance required to survive until spring. The doctor's office sits on the ground floor of a modest building, distinguished from surrounding shops only by a discreet brass plate beside the door. You hesitate before knocking, suddenly aware of your appearance, the patched clothes, the dirt ground into your skin after weeks of inadequate washing, the general aura of poverty that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Doctors treat the poor, but they rarely respect them. You brace yourself for disdain, for condescension, for the particular tone the professional classes use when addressing those they consider beneath them. To your surprise, the door is opened not by a servant or nurse, but by the doctor himself. He's partially dressed for the day, shirt and waistcoat, but no jacket, as though caught in the middle of his morning routine. "Yes?" he says sharply, then recognizes you. "Ah, the Clark boy." His expression shifts from irritation to professional concern. "Your brother is worse?" You nod, suddenly finding it hard to speak past the lump in your throat. The simple acknowledgement of your fear makes it harder to control. "His breathing," you manage. "It's very bad this morning." The doctor sighs, glancing back into his office where a cup of tea steams on his desk. For a moment you think he'll refuse, will tell you to come back during proper hours, but he reaches for his coat and medical bag. "I'll come now," he says, "though I warned your mother yesterday. Without proper facilities, there's only so much I can do." The walk back to your tenement seems longer with the doctor at your side. He sets a brisk pace despite the icy pavement, apparently immune to the cold in his good wool coat and leather boots. You struggle to keep up, your inadequate footwear slipping on frozen cobblestones. "Have you considered service?" the doctor asks abruptly after several minutes of silence. "A boy your age could find a position in a good house, regular meals, warm quarters." The suggestion is not unkind, but it reveals how little he understands your world. Service means leaving your family, who depend on your wages. It means abandoning them to face winter alone. "My family needs me," you say simply. He makes a non-committal sound, neither approving nor disapproving. Noble, but perhaps impractical. One less mouth to feed might benefit them more than your meagre earnings. This cold calculation, weighing lives and needs like entries in an account book, is how the upper classes view poverty, a problem to be managed rather than people to be helped. You're saved from responding by your arrival at the tenement. The doctor looks up at the crumbling building with poorly disguised distaste before following you inside. The scene in your room has changed in your absence. Your mother sits beside Jamie, administering drops of laudanum in water. Emma is at the fire, building it higher than usual with precious coal. Your father stands at the window, his expression grim as he turns to see the doctor. "He woke coughing blood," your mother says without preamble. "Just a little, but..." The doctor's professional mask slips for a moment, revealing genuine concern. Blood in the lungs is a very bad sign, particularly in a child already weakened by winter privation. He examines Jamie thoroughly, listening to his chest with a stethoscope, feeling his glands, checking his temperature with the back of his hand. The examination seems to take hours, though it can only be minutes. Finally, he straightens, his expression carefully neutral. "The infection has worsened," he says. "There is fluid in both lungs." Your mother makes a small sound, quickly stifled. "What can we do?" The doctor hesitates, clearly weighing how much truth to share. "Continue the laudanum for the cough. Keep him warm. Warmer than this, if possible." He glances at the fire, which is already consuming your coal at an alarming rate. "He needs nourishing food, beef tea ideally." Beef tea, the expensive extract of meat simmered for hours, is far beyond your means. Your mother nods anyway, unwilling to admit the impossibility. "And The doctor seems uncomfortable now. Prepare yourselves. The next 2 days will determine the outcome. Children can recover remarkably from even serious infection, but they can also decline very rapidly. The clinical words barely disguise their meaning. Jamie might die, and soon. The doctor reaches into his bag again and removes a small packet. Mustard powder, he says, handing it to your mother. Mix with water into a paste and apply to his chest. It may help draw out the infection. This small kindness, like the laudanum yesterday, seems at odds with his professional detachment. Perhaps even parish doctors used to poverty and death are not immune to the suffering of children. I will return tomorrow, he says, reaching for his hat. Send for me sooner if there is significant change. After he leaves, the room is silent except for Jamie's laboured breathing. Your father returns to the window, staring out at the frozen city as though it might offer some solution. Your mother busies herself preparing the mustard plaster, her movements mechanical, precise, a way to keep functioning when emotion threatens to overwhelm. Emma touches your arm, pulling you slightly aside. I heard the carter who delivers to the butcher shop say they were looking for help today, she whispers. Good wages, we should go. Work, always work. The only answer the poor have to any crisis. You can't heal Jamie directly, can't change the cold or the damp or the thin walls that let winter in, but you can work, earn, bring home money for food and coal and medicine. I'll go, you decide. You stay with Jamie. 4 of us don't need to be here, but he shouldn't be alone if you can't finish the sentence. Emma nods, understanding. Bring food if you can, she says. Real food. He needs strength. Your father, overhearing, turns from the window. I'll come with you, he says. My hand's better today. Between us, we might earn enough for meat. Your mother doesn't object, though losing both primary wage earners is a risk. She understands the calculus as well as anyone. Without better food and more coal, Jamie's chances diminish by the hour. Within minutes, you and your father are back on the frozen streets, heading toward the butcher shop in the next neighbourhood. The cold seems less important now, the aching feet and numb fingers mere inconveniences in the face of Jamie's more serious suffering. The doctor, your father says as you walk, breaking a long silence. Is he hopeful? The question carries so much weight. Your father, unable to protect his family from winter, from poverty, from disease, reduced to asking a child for reassurance. Jamie's strong, you say, avoiding a direct answer, and we'll get what he needs. Food, heat. Your father nods, accepting this evasion as the best comfort available. Yes, he says firmly, we will. The butcher shop appears ahead, a rare spot of light and warmth on the otherwise grey street. Through the window you can see the shop owner in his bloody apron, serving a well-dressed woman who points imperiously at different cuts of meat. A delivery cart stands outside, the horse stamping its hooves against the cold, breath steaming. Near the back entrance, several men are unloading carcasses, beef and pork mostly, swinging from hooks, destined for the shop's cold room before being butchered for the wealthier customers who can afford meat even in winter. You approach the cart driver, a burly man with a face reddened by cold and probably alcohol. Heard you were looking for help, you say without preamble. He looks you and your father up and down, assessing your strength, your desperation, your willingness to work for whatever he offers. Might be, he says finally. Got deliveries all day, need strong backs to load and unload. 6p for the day. 6p. More than you expected. Enough for meat and coal if you're careful. You nod eagerly. Your father beside you does the same, flexing his injured hand experimentally. Right then, the carter says, start with them carcasses into the cold room quick as you can. Butcher doesn't want 'em freezing out here. The work is brutal, lifting heavy carcasses, carrying them through the narrow back door into the shop's storage room. The meat is partially frozen, the blood on your hands congealing almost instantly in the cold air. But it's work, and the physical effort at least keeps you warm as morning deepens toward noon. Your father struggles with his injured hand but says nothing, grimly hefting his share of each load. You notice him favouring the hand more as the hours pass, but he waves away your concern with a short, "I'm fine." By midday, the unloading is complete, and the carter sets you to loading smaller cuts into the delivery wagon, packages wrapped in paper and twine destined for the kitchens of wealthy homes where servants will transform them into roasts and stews and pies. The contrast isn't lost on you, handling food you could never afford, sending it to people who will barely appreciate its value. A single package contains more meat than your family sees in a month. Careful with that one, the carter warns as you lift a particularly expensive-looking parcel. That's for Councillor Barton's dinner party, worth more than you'll earn all winter. The casual cruelty of the remark, true though it may be, makes your father stiffen beside you. For a moment you think he might say something, might let his simmering anger at the injustice of it all boil over, but he just adjusts his grip on the package and continues loading. Pride is a luxury, and your family can't afford luxuries in winter. The afternoon delivery route takes you and your father across London from modest middle-class homes to grand houses with separate entrances for tradespeople. At each stop you unload meat packages while the carter presents bills and collects payment. The work isn't difficult, but the constant exposure to the biting cold makes every movement painful. Your father's hand is clearly getting worse, the knuckles swollen again, the fingers stiff when he tries to grip packages. He says nothing, but you can see the pain in his face, the way he cradles the hand against his body between deliveries. "You should rest it," you say quietly during a brief pause between stops. He shakes his head. "Can't afford to," he replies simply. The words carry no self-pity, just the plain truth of your situation. Winter doesn't allow the luxury of recovery. Work or starve, those are the only options. The carter is neither kind nor cruel, just indifferent, viewing you both as temporary tools to be used and discarded. He doesn't notice or care about your father's injury, doesn't offer breaks or food or even conversation beyond necessary instructions. This casual disregard is normal. The working poor are invisible to most Londoners, necessary but unworthy of notice, like the horses that pull the carts or the gas that lights the lamps. By 3 o'clock, with darkness already gathering, you reach the final delivery. A grand house in Belgravia with white columns and gleaming windows. The contrast between this palace and your single-room dwelling is so stark it almost seems they can't exist in the same city, the same reality. "Wait here," the carter instructs, taking the final package himself, clearly unwilling to let rough labourers approach the house directly. "Don't touch nothing." The warning is unnecessary. You're both too tired, too cold, and too focused on getting paid to consider mischief. Your father leans against the cart, resting his injured hand inside his coat for warmth, his face grey with exhaustion. "We'll get something good for Jamie," you say, trying to bolster his spirits. "Real meat, maybe even an orange." The winter fruit, expensive and rare, might tempt even a sick child's appetite. Your father nods, mustering a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "An orange," he agrees. He'd like that. The back door of the grand house opens and a woman emerges, not the lady of the house certainly, but a cook or housekeeper by her clean, practical dress. She's speaking to the carter, but her eyes drift to you and your father waiting by the cart. Something in your posture, the clear exhaustion, your father's poorly concealed pain, seems to catch her attention. She disappears back inside, only to return moments later with a bundle wrapped in cloth. "For your lads," she tells the carter, handing it to him. kitchen scraps just going to waste otherwise. The carter shrugs, takes the bundle, and tosses it to your father as he returns to the cart. "Your lucky day," he says without interest. Your father unwraps the cloth to reveal several thick slices of roast beef, a heel of good bread, and even a small piece of hard cheese. Not scraps at all, but a decent meal deliberately prepared by someone who recognized hunger when she saw it. These small kindnesses exist alongside winter's cruelty, brief moments of human connection that cross the rigid barriers of class. Not enough to change the system, but sometimes enough to get through one more day. Your father rewraps the food carefully, tucking it inside his coat. "For Jamie first," he says quietly, "then the others." The return journey to the butcher shop seems longer, the cold more penetrating as the brief winter daylight fades completely. Gas lamps flicker to life along main streets, but they provide more shadow than illumination, their light creating moving patterns that make the familiar city seem strange and threatening. At the shop, the carter counts out your wages, 6p each, as promised. The coins are cold in your palm but represent more security than you've had in weeks. Combined with the unexpected food gift, today feels like a rare victory against winter's siege. "Need help tomorrow?" your father asks the carter, trying to sound casual, not desperate. The man shrugs. "Maybe. Be here at 7 if you want to find out." It's not a promise, but it's hope, possible work, possible wages, possible survival for one more day. The butcher himself emerges from the shop as you're preparing to leave, a heavy-set man with hands permanently stained by blood, despite his apparent prosperity. His shrewd eyes take in your father's condition, the careful way he holds his injured hand. "You're dock worker Clark, ain't you?" he says. "Recognise you from the Ship and Compass pub." Your father straightens slightly, dignity returning at being recognised, remembered as something more than anonymous labour. "That's right, sir, though not working the docks just now." He gestures vaguely at his hand. The butcher nods. "Heard about that? Bad business." He hesitates, then adds, "Got bones and scraps to sell cheap if you're interested. Good for soup, better than what most get." This is not charity. The butcher will still profit, but it's a small concession to shared humanity, to the recognition that winter makes victims of even the hardest workers. "Appreciate that," your father says, maintaining his pride even in need. "Might take you up on it. Got a sick boy at home." The butcher disappears back into his shop, returning with a package wrapped in paper. 3p, he says, naming a price below even his usual discount. "Good marrow bones and some stewing cuts. More meat than bone, which isn't my usual practice, mind." Your father counts out 3 of his precious 6p without hesitation. Meat means protein, means strength, means a fighting chance for Jamie to recover. "My wife makes a good bone broth," he says as he takes the package, this small talk a way of maintaining dignity in the transaction. "Been too long since the children had proper meat?" The butcher nods, accepting this fiction that the purchase is a choice rather than desperate necessity. "Build strength in winter," he agrees, "worth the expense." This exchange, the pretense of normal commerce layered over the reality of near starvation, is part of how the poor maintain humanity in inhumane conditions. Everyone knows the truth, but the polite fiction preserves essential dignity. With your wages and the precious meat secured, you and your father begin the long walk home. The temperature has dropped further as night deepens, and a light snow has begun to fall, beautiful in wealthier neighbourhoods where it dusts elegant facades and wrought iron fences, but dangerous in the slums where it hides ice patches and freezes already inadequate housing. should get more coal, your father says as you pass a merchant selling fuel from a cart, one of the few still operating as darkness falls. The meat will help, but without heat. He doesn't need to finish. Without adequate heat, even the best food won't save a child with pneumonia. 2 more precious pennies gone for a small sack of coal, expensive at this hour when the merchant knows buyers have few options. You heft it onto your shoulder, ignoring the way the cold has worked into your muscles, making every movement painful. I don't think a lot of people realise that cold actually physically hurts. I'm talking real intense pain, especially in your extremities. During my research, I interviewed an Arctic explorer who described the sensation perfectly. It's like being stabbed with thousands of tiny needles, then having your skin set on fire when you finally warm up. Victorian Londoners felt this pain daily for months. The familiar streets of your neighbourhood offer little comfort as you approach home. If anything, they seem more desperate at night, darker, dirtier. The smell of poverty more pronounced as waste freezes in gutters and smoke hangs heavy in the still air. Outside your tenement building, a small crowd has gathered, never a good sign. Crowds in the slums usually mean disaster, fire, accident, violence, or worst of all, eviction. Your father quickens his pace, pushing through the onlookers with you close behind. To your relief, the focus of attention isn't your family's room, but the building's main water pipe, which has frozen and burst, sending a spray of water into the street where it's already forming a dangerous ice slick. The landlord, a thin, sour-faced man rarely seen except when collecting rent, stands helplessly beside a plumber who shakes his head at the damage. "Can't fix it tonight," the plumber is saying as you pass. "Need daylight and warmer weather. Temporary patch is the best I can do." "And who pays for all this?" the landlord demands, gesturing at the ice-covered street. No one mentions the tenants who will bear the real cost, days without water except what can be carried from the public pump 3 streets away. In winter, this means greater hardship, more time spent in the cold, more energy expended on a basic necessity. You exchange a glance with your father, one more challenge in a season of challenges. Inside your room, the scene is both better and worse than you feared. The fire burns reasonably well. Emma must have used most of the remaining coal, and the space is warm enough that no one's breath is visible. But Jamie lies motionless on the bed, his face flushed with fever, his breathing still laboured despite the mustard plaster visible on his chest. Your mother looks up as you enter, her expression brightening slightly at the sight of the packages in your hands. "You found work," she says, relief evident in her voice. "Delivery cart," your father confirms. "Decent pay, and more promised for tomorrow, maybe." You unwrap the food first, the gift from the cook and the purchased meat, laying it out on the small table like treasure, which it is. Protein, fat, calories, the building blocks of survival that have been in such short supply. "All real meat," Emma whispers, her eyes wide at the unexpected bounty. "And cheese." Your mother is already moving to the fire, placing the pot of water that never leaves the hearth during winter. "We'll make broth first," she decides, something Jamie can swallow even with his throat so sore. The bone broth takes time, the marrow and scraps of meat simmering to extract every bit of nutrition. The smell fills the small room, rich, savoury, a reminder of better times and proper meals. Even Jamie stirs at the scent, his eyes opening briefly before sliding closed again. While the broth cooks, you tell your mother about the burst pipe, the coming water shortage. She sighs but doesn't complain. Complaining changes nothing. "We'll manage," she says simply. "Mrs. Higgins has that big rain barrel. She'll share. This is slum solidarity, the understanding that survival depends on mutual aid. Mrs. Higgins will share her water. Someday you'll share your coal or food or medicine with her." No one keeps strict accounts. Everyone just does what they can, when they can. The butcher's meat yields a surprisingly rich broth, testament to his small kindness in giving you better cuts than the price warranted. Your mother skims the precious fat from the top, saving it for later use. Nothing is wasted in winter, then pours a small amount into a cup. "Let's try to get some into him," she says, moving to Jamie's side. The process is painfully slow, raising his head, coaxing a spoonful of broth between his lips, waiting to make sure he swallows rather than chokes. Some dribbles down his chin, but most goes in, and after several spoonfuls, his eyes open more fully. "Tastes good," he whispers, the first coherent words he's spoken all day. Your mother's eyes fill with tears that she quickly blinks away. "There's plenty more," she promises. "You just rest and get strong." The remainder of the food is divided carefully, small portions that seem like a feast after days of near starvation. Your father insists that you and Emma take the largest shares. "Growing children need it most," he says firmly, allowing no argument. In truth, a working man needs calories too, especially one recovering from injury who hopes to work again tomorrow. But paternal sacrifice is as much a part of winter as the cold itself, another way the poor hold on to humanity in inhuman conditions. The meal and the better fire transform the room's atmosphere. Stomachs at least partially filled, extremities no longer numb with cold. The constant edge of panic recedes slightly. Not safety, not security, but a brief respite from immediate crisis. Your father sorts the remaining coins, 3 pence left from his wages, all 6 of yours intact. 9 pence total, a fortune by recent standards, enough for coal tomorrow and perhaps bread, with something left for emergencies. "If the carter takes us on again and Jamie improves, we might actually get ahead," he says, allowing himself rare optimism. "Might even afford to pay the doctor something when he returns tomorrow." Pride again. The need to be seen as paying one's way, even when the doctor expects nothing. The poor cannot afford pride as a rule, but they cling to scraps of it nonetheless, essential to human dignity. As if summoned by the mention, a knock at the door makes everyone start. The hour is late for visitors, nearly 9 by the church bell's last chiming. Your mother opens the door cautiously to reveal not the doctor, but Mrs. Higgins again, her face tight with worry. "Sorry to disturb," she begins, then stops, her eyes widening at the sight of Jamie propped up on the bed, sipping broth. "He's better." "A little," your mother confirms. "The doctor's remedy and some good broth. What brings you out so late?" Mrs. Higgins seems to remember her purpose. "It's the water pipe. The landlord's posted notice. No repairs for at least 3 days, he says, and they've closed the local pump for cleaning." She twists her hands anxiously. "With my youngest still feverish, I can't manage the walk to Chester Street for water. I wondered if..." "I'll go in the morning," your father says immediately. "Fetch enough for both families." "We couldn't ask," Mrs. Higgins begins, but your father waves away her protest. "Not asking, offering. Your Tom brought Jamie a top when he was well. Neighbours help neighbours." The exchange is simple, matter-of-fact, but it represents the complex economy of survival in the slums. Favours given and received, help offered without expectation of immediate return, but with the understanding that the community survives together or not at all. After Mrs. Higgins leaves, the family prepares for night. The improved fire means slightly better sleeping arrangements. You and Emma still on the floor, but with a blanket that doesn't feel like ice against your skin. Your father will take first watch by Jamie. Then your mother, with you covering the pre-dawn hours as usual. Try to sleep properly, your mother tells you as you settle on your makeshift bed. You'll need strength for tomorrow. Sleep comes more easily tonight, your body surrendering to exhaustion, comforted by the relative warmth and the small security of food in your stomach, money in the tin box, and Jamie's slight improvement. Dreams come in fragments. Summer days, full meals, a world without the constant presence of cold and hunger. In sleep, winter releases its grip on your mind, allowing brief escape from the reality that will return with waking. Something wakes you in the darkest hours, a sound, a movement, something your sleeping mind registers as wrong. You open your eyes to find the room lit only by the dying fire. Your father sleeps sitting up against the wall, exhaustion having claimed him despite his intention to watch over Jamie. Your mother has taken over, her silhouette visible beside the bed. But it's not her movement that woke you. A subtle wrongness permeates the room, a change in the sound of Jamie's breathing. Instead of the wet rattle that's been constant for days, his breath comes in short, rapid gasps, each one seeming more desperate than the last. You rise quietly, careful not to wake Emma, who sleeps beside you, and move to your mother's side. Her face in the faint firelight shows naked fear, all pretense of confidence stripped away in this darkest part of night. "He's worse," she whispers, "much worse. The fever's back and he can't seem to get air." Jamie's face is flushed dark red with fever and effort, his small chest heaving as he fights for each breath. His eyes are open but unfocused, seeing nothing, all his energy directed toward the increasingly desperate battle to breathe. "Should we try more laudanum?" you suggest, eyeing the small bottle on the table. Your mother hesitates. "The doctor said only twice a day. Too much could..." She doesn't finish, but you understand. The medicine that eases breathing can also slow it completely if given too generously. "I'll get the doctor," you decide, already reaching for your coat. "He said to call him for significant changes." "It's the middle of the night," your mother protests weakly. "And the snow. If we wait until morning, it could be too late." The words hang in the air between you, the fear made real by speaking it. Jamie could die before dawn. The knowledge is in your mother's face, in the way she clutches her youngest child's hand, in the desperate way she nods acceptance of your plan. "Be careful," is all she says as you finish dressing. "The streets are dangerous this late." She means more than ice and cold. Night brings out London's predators, human and otherwise. Footpads who would kill for the few coins in your pocket. Drunks who fight without provocation. Feral dogs that roam in hungry packs. The risks are substantial, but the greater risk lies in Jamie's increasingly laboured breathing, in the rattle that's changing from wet to desperate. No choice, really. No choice at all. You slip out without waking your father or Emma. Let them sleep while they can. Soon enough, they'll either be celebrating improvement or grieving loss. Either way, they'll need their strength. Outside, the night has transformed London again. Snow falls steadily now, already several inches deep on the ground, smoothing the city's harsh edges, hiding its filth beneath a layer of deceptive purity. In wealthy neighbourhoods, it might look magical. Here, it's just one more layer of difficulty, one more obstacle between survival and surrender. The cold hits like a physical blow after the relative warmth of your room. Your breath catches, your lungs protesting the shock, your eyes watering in the bitter wind. For a moment you consider turning back, the journey suddenly seeming impossible, the cold too intense, the distance too great. But Jamie's desperate, gasping echoes in your memory. Forward then, one step, then another, into the night, into the snow, into the heart of winter's power. For Jamie, for family, for survival itself. The streets are eerily empty, most sensible Londoners long abed, only the truly desperate or dangerous abroad at this hour. Your footsteps crunch in the fresh snow, seeming unnaturally loud in the muffled silence. Occasionally you pass evidence of other night walkers. Footprints leading down alleys, a forgotten glove frozen to a railing, once a splash of something dark that might be wine but is probably blood. London after midnight belongs to its shadows, to its secrets, to those parts of society that can't bear daylight scrutiny. You move quickly, head down, trying to project purpose rather than vulnerability, looking like prey attracts predators. The journey that took an hour this morning seems endless now, each street blending into the next, landmarks hidden by snow or transformed by darkness. Twice you make wrong turns, having to backtrack, precious minutes lost in the increasingly desperate race against Jamie's failing breath. A church clock strikes 3 as you finally reach the doctor's street, the hollow sound barely penetrating the thick falling snow. The houses here are respectable, middle class, their windows dark, their residents safely asleep in warm beds with full stomachs. The doctor's house is distinguished by the small brass plate beside the door, now dusted with snow. You hesitate before knocking, the action suddenly seeming presumptuous, the urgency of your mission wavering in the face of social hierarchy and proper behaviour. But Jamie's face, contorted with the effort to breathe, pushes aside such concerns. You knock firmly, then again more loudly when no response comes. Finally, a light appears in an upstairs window, and moments later the door opens to reveal the doctor in a dressing gown, hair dishevelled from sleep, expression caught between professional concern and personal irritation. "What is it?" he demands, then recognises you. "The Clark boy. Has there been a change?" "He can't breathe properly," you explain, the words tumbling out. "It's different than before, faster, more desperate. My mother's afraid." You can't finish the sentence, can't speak the fear aloud to this near stranger. The doctor, however, understands immediately. He's seen this progression before, has watched countless children struggle for breath as fluid fills their lungs, has stood helpless as too many lost the battle. "Wait here," he says, leaving the door ajar as he disappears back into the house. He returns minutes later, fully dressed, medical bag in hand. Without asking permission, a doctor assumes such rights. He places 2 fingers against your throat, checking your pulse, then peers at your face in the dim light of the hallway. "You walked all the way from your district? In this?" He gestures at the heavily falling snow visible through the still open door. "That's nearly 2 miles. You nod, not seeing the relevance. "Of course you walked. How else would you have come?" The doctor shakes his head slightly, perhaps at your endurance, perhaps at the desperation that drove it. "Well, you can't walk back in this. It's worsening by the minute. We'll take my carriage." This unexpected kindness, using his own carriage, risking his horse in the snowstorm for a slum family who cannot possibly pay him, catches you off guard. The doctor notes your surprise with a small, tired smile. "Contrary to what you might think, boy, I didn't become a parish doctor for the money. Now come, quickly. If the breathing has changed as you describe, we have little time." The doctor's carriage is small but well maintained, the horse a sturdy creature clearly used to London's difficult streets. You sit awkwardly on the edge of the seat, painfully aware of the snow melting from your boots onto the clean floor, the smell of poverty you carry with you into this space of relative luxury. "Tell me more about the change in breathing," the doctor says as he guides the horse through snow-clogged streets. You describe what you witnessed. The increased pace, the desperate quality, the way Jamie's whole body seemed focused on the struggle for air. The doctor listens without interrupting, his face giving away nothing of his thoughts. "And the fever returned after seeming to break?" he asks. You nod. "My mother said he felt cooler earlier in the evening after we got some broth into him, then it came back worse." The doctor makes a non-committal sound. Secondary infection, perhaps, not uncommon with pneumonia. The casual clinical assessment sends a chill through you, unrelated to the winter night. This is just another case to him, one of dozens he'll see this winter. But for you, it's Jamie's life hanging in the balance. Bright, curious Jamie who collects interesting stones and makes up stories about cloud shapes and laughs at your terrible jokes. The carriage struggles through increasingly heavy snow, the wheels sometimes catching, the horse snorting clouds of steam as it labours forward. The doctor mutters under his breath, not at you, but at the weather, the delay, the difficult journey. "Time matters in these cases," he says, more to himself than to you. "Catch it early enough." He doesn't finish the thought, but you understand the implication. There's a point beyond which even medical knowledge can't help, a threshold past which a child's struggling lungs simply cannot recover. The question hanging in the frigid air between you, has Jamie already crossed that threshold? When the carriage finally reaches your tenement, the snow is falling so heavily that the wheels can go no further. The doctor tethers the horse to a nearby post, hefts his medical bag, and follows you through the building's entrance and up the creaking stairs. The journey that seemed endless on foot has taken mere minutes by carriage, a vivid illustration of how differently time moves for different social classes, even in crisis. Your mother's face when you enter shows both relief and intensified fear, glad to see the doctor but terrified of what his presence in the middle of the night might confirm. Your father is awake now, standing protectively near the bed while Emma stokes the fire higher than usual, economy would allow. Jamie lies unnaturally still, each breath visibly taxing his small body. The doctor moves to the bedside immediately, his professional demeanour taking over, personal discomfort at the surroundings set aside. He listens to Jamie's chest, feels his fevered skin, checks his pulse, peers into his throat with a small mirror and lamp from his bag. The examination seems to take forever, each moment stretching as the family watches in tense silence, reading the doctor's face for clues, searching for hope in his neutral expression. Finally, he straightens, turning to face you all. "The infection has moved deeper into the lungs," he says, his voice carefully modulated to convey seriousness without panic. "The fluid is significant." Your mother makes a small sound, quickly stifled. Can you... She can't form the question, fear choking the words. The doctor hesitates, weighing truth against hope, professional honesty against human kindness. "I'll be direct with you," he says finally. "His condition is grave. In the hospital, we would attempt a procedure to drain the fluid, but here..." He glances around the small room, the inadequate light, the less than sterile conditions. "There must be something," your father says, his voice rough with emotion normally kept carefully contained. The doctor reaches into his bag, removing several bottles. "We can try aggressive treatments," he says. "I have stronger medicine than what I left previously, but I must be honest, the outcome is uncertain." This clinical language, outcome, uncertain, is his way of preparing you all for the possibility of Jamie's death without saying the words directly. A kindness of sorts, allowing the family to maintain hope while beginning to brace for loss. The next hour passes in a blur of activity. The doctor administers various medicines, applies hot compresses to Jamie's chest, shows your mother how to position him to ease breathing. Everyone helps, your father boiling water for the compresses, Emma maintaining the fire at its hottest, you running to neighbours for clean rags when the doctor requests them. Through it all, Jamie remains frighteningly still between moments of gasping struggle, his normally energetic body eerily passive, all strength directed toward the simple, essential act of drawing breath. "Now we wait," the doctor says finally, packing away some of his implements. "The next few hours will tell us whether the treatments have effect." Your father walks to the window, staring out at the still falling snow. "You can't go back in this," he says to the doctor. "Roads will be impassable soon." The doctor follows his gaze, frowning at the worsening storm. "I should stay regardless," he says after a moment. "The boy will need monitoring and the medicines may require adjustment." This decision to remain in a slum dwelling to spend hours with a poor family goes well beyond his professional obligations as a parish doctor. Usually, such physicians make brief visits, dispense basic treatments, and move quickly to the next case. Their time is stretched too thin for real care, their resources too limited for proper treatment. Your mother seems to recognize the unusual nature of his choice. "We're grateful," she says simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. The doctor nods awkwardly, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Perhaps some tea," he suggests, changing the subject to more practical matters. "And the fire should be maintained at this level if possible." Tea, a simple request that highlights the complex economics of poverty. The precious real tea purchased yesterday is gone, used in last night's meal. What remains is twice-used leaves, barely able to colour hot water, let alone provide the restorative drink the doctor expects. Your mother looks at you, a silent communication passing between you. The last 6 pennies meant for tomorrow's coal could buy fresh tea. The calculation is immediate. Jamie's life against tomorrow's warmth. No choice at all, really. "I'll get some," you say, reaching for your still damp coat. "In this storm?" The doctor looks surprised. "Surely you have something in the house. Just tea." The casual assumption that even the poorest home would have such a basic staple reveals the gap between his world and yours. Your father intervenes, pride making him straighten despite his exhaustion. "We're a bit short at present," he says, the careful phrasing disguising absolute poverty as temporary inconvenience. "Been focused on medicine for the boy." Understanding dawns on the doctor's face. "Of course," he says quickly, "but please don't go out again in this weather. I've imposed enough by staying. Water is perfectly adequate. Tea's better for strength," your mother insists, "and we'd want to offer proper hospitality to someone helping our Jamie." Pride again. Even in crisis, even in poverty, the need to maintain certain standards, to not appear completely destitute before outsiders. The doctor recognizes the sentiment and respects it, changing tactics. "Actually," he says, reaching into his bag again, "I often carry tea with me for long nights." He produces a small tin. "If you'd be kind enough to prepare it, that would be most welcome." This fiction that he routinely carries tea rather than adding it to his bag specifically for house calls in poor districts allows your family to accept without loss of dignity a small kindness layered within the larger one of his continued presence. While your mother prepares the tea, the doctor sits beside Jamie, occasionally checking his pulse, adjusting the compresses, administering small doses of medicine when the breathing becomes too laboured. His dedication is unexpected, a reminder that not all who serve the poor do so reluctantly or without compassion. "You're not what I expected," your father says quietly, joining the doctor by Jamie's bedside. The doctor glances up, a hint of amusement in his tired eyes. "And what did you expect?" Your father shrugs. "Someone who'd do the minimum, write it off as another slum child beyond help." "I was that doctor once," he admits, surprising everyone with his candour. "Early in my career, overwhelmed by the scale of suffering, the impossibility of meaningful change. it seemed easier to become detached. What changed? Emma asks, bringing him the cup of tea your mother has prepared. The doctor accepts it with a nod of thanks. A case very much like this one, he says after taking a sip. A child with pneumonia, a family doing everything possible with impossibly limited resources. He looks down at Jamie. I gave the usual treatments, said the usual words, and left, already mentally moving on to the next case. 3 days later, I returned to find the child had died and the mother. He stops, perhaps remembering that he's speaking to a family in the same precarious position. It was a turning point, he continues more carefully. I realized that detachment wasn't protecting me from anything worth being protected from. It was just preventing me from being the doctor I intended to be when I chose this profession. This glimpse into his personal history creates a momentary bridge across the vast social gap between him and your family. Not friendship, not equality, but a small connection of shared humanity in the face of winter's cruelty. Outside, the storm continues to worsen, snow piling against the window, finding its way through cracks to form small drifts on the interior sill. The wind howls down the narrow street, its moaning a background to Jamie's laboured breathing, nature's lament echoing human suffering. By dawn, the room has settled into a strange, tense routine. The doctor dozes in the room's single chair, waking at the slightest change in Jamie's breathing. Your mother sits beside the bed, constantly adjusting blankets, wiping Jamie's forehead, whispering encouragements he may not hear. Your father maintains the fire at its highest level, using coal at a rate that would normally be unthinkable, a silent acknowledgement that warmth now matters more than tomorrow's reserves. You and Emma take turns fetching fresh snow to melt for water, the burst pipe having left the building dry. Each trip outside reveals a London transformed, streets nearly impassable, normal activity suspended, the usual morning traffic of workers and vendors replaced by eerie silence, broken only by the occasional sound of snow sliding from rooftops. Never seen it this bad, your father comments, looking out at the white wasteland that was your street. Not since the winter of 38, maybe. The doctor joins him at the window. It's city-wide, he confirms. My rounds today will be challenging, if not impossible. The implication is clear. He's thinking beyond Jamie's case, to the dozens of other patients who will be expecting his visit, many in conditions as desperate as your brother's. The weight of so many lives dependent on one man's knowledge and presence. As if sensing these thoughts, your father turns to him. When it's safe to travel, you shouldn't feel obligated to stay. We can follow your instructions. The doctor shakes his head. The roads won't be passable for hours yet, possibly all day, and your son, he glances at Jamie. The next few hours remain critical. Critical. The word hangs in the air, its medical meaning and everyday significance converging on a simple truth. Jamie is still fighting for his life, the outcome still uncertain. Around 8 o'clock, by the distant chiming of church bells barely audible through the storm, a change comes over Jamie. His breathing, which has maintained its desperate rhythm through the night, suddenly becomes more erratic, faster, then slower, sometimes stopping altogether for terrifying seconds before resuming. The doctor moves quickly to his side, pressing an ear to his chest, lifting eyelids to check pupils, feeling for the pulse in his throat. His expression, carefully neutral until now, shows the first signs of real concern. The medicine should have shown some effect by now. He murmurs, more to himself than to the watching family. He straightens, making a decision. We need to try something more aggressive. From his bag, he produces a small case containing a needle and vial. This is a stronger stimulant, he explains, filling the syringe with practiced efficiency. It carries risks, but at this point the greater risk lies in doing nothing. Your mother's face shows fear, but also resignation. The desperate calculus of watching a child slip away makes any risk worth taking. She nods permission, turning her face aside as the doctor administers the injection, unable to watch this invasion of her child's already suffering body. The effect is not immediate. For long minutes, nothing seems to change. Jamie continues his irregular breathing, each gasp and pause torturing the watching family. Then, gradually, a more regular rhythm emerges. The desperate quality diminishes slightly. The pauses between breaths become shorter, more consistent. The doctor listens to his chest again, nodding slightly to himself. Better, he says cautiously. The airways are opening somewhat. His body is fighting. So he'll recover, Emma asks, hope making her voice younger, more vulnerable than her usual stoic demeanour. The doctor chooses his words carefully. He's responding to treatment, which is a positive sign, but with pneumonia, especially in winter conditions. He glances at the snow still visible through the window. We must remain cautious in our expectations. This measured response, neither false hope nor premature despair, is perhaps the most honest interaction the doctor has had with your family. Not the practiced detachment of his early visit, not the unexpected compassion of his overnight stay, but a careful balance of medical truth and human kindness. The morning crawls forward, marked by small improvements in Jamie's condition. His fever reduces slightly, his breathing becomes more regular, he occasionally stirs or murmurs in his sleep-like state. Each small change is noted, celebrated cautiously, added to the fragile structure of hope the family is building. Around midday, a knock at the door startles everyone. Visitors are unlikely in such weather. The storm having shut down normal neighbourhood activity, your father opens it to reveal Mrs. Higgins, her shawl white with snow, her face pinched with cold. Heard the doctor's carriage was outside all night, she says without preamble, her eyes going immediately to Jamie. How is the boy? Fighting, your mother replies, the single word conveying both the gravity of the situation and the refusal to surrender to it. Mrs. Higgins nods, understanding everything not said. Brought this, she says, holding out a covered pot, broth from our Sunday bone. Better than nothing for keeping up strength. The Sunday bone, the single piece of meat a working family might afford for the week's one special meal. For Mrs. Higgins to share it, especially given her own children's needs, represents sacrifice beyond normal neighbourly kindness. You shouldn't have, your mother begins, the token protest required by pride. Nonsense, Mrs. Higgins cuts her off. Your boy needs it more than mine today. Tomorrow, who knows? We help each other through winter. Only way any of us survive. This simple statement, we help each other through winter, encapsulates the slum philosophy of survival. Not charity as the wealthy conceive it, not the institutional cold comfort of workhouses and parish relief, but direct personal sharing of whatever one has when another's need is greater. The doctor, watching this exchange, seems both moved and uncomfortable, perhaps seeing more clearly the vast web of mutual aid that exists beneath the surface of slum poverty, a system invisible to most of his social class who imagine the poor as merely waiting for handouts. The broth is quickly warming on the fire, its rich smell filling the small room. Even in illness, Jamie responds to it, turning his head slightly toward the source, his first voluntary movement in hours. A good sign, the doctor says, noting the reaction. Awareness returning, hope flares stronger in this simple observation. Not just breathing, but responding. Not just existing, but participating, however minimally, in the world around him. Outside, the storm has begun to ease, snow still falling but less forcefully, wind diminishing from howl to whisper. London will begin to dig itself out, to create paths through the drifts, to resume the essential activities that keep the massive city functioning. The doctor moves to the window, studying the changed landscape. "I should be able to make my rounds soon," he says, his tone suggesting reluctance rather than eagerness to leave. "There will be others needing attention after such a storm." Your father nods, understanding the implicit apology. "You've done more than enough for us," he says, "staying the night, using your own medicines." The unspoken question of payment hangs awkwardly between them. Parish doctors are paid by the parish, not directly by patients, but extra services, special medicines, house calls beyond required visits. These sometimes come with expectations of additional compensation. Your father makes a decision, moving to the loose floorboard where the family's meagre savings are hidden. The precious 6 pence you had planned to spend on tea earlier, the last of your money, are extracted and offered with simple dignity. "It's not much," your father acknowledges, "but we'd like to compensate you for the special medicines and your time." The doctor looks at the coins, at the proud man offering them, at the room showing every sign of desperate poverty managed with dignity. For a moment he seems about to refuse, the natural response of relative wealth to such a meagre sum offered at such obvious cost. But something in your father's face stops him, the need to provide, to pay his way, to maintain the fiction of equal exchange rather than charity. The doctor reaches out and takes 3 of the 6 pennies. "This covers the medicine," he says formally. "My time is already compensated by the parish." This compromise, accepting half the offered amount, justifying it specifically, allows your father to maintain dignity while still leaving the family with some small reserve. Another small kindness in a night of unexpected compassion. "I'll return this evening," the doctor continues, gathering his things. "Earlier if the road's clear quickly, continue with the compresses and the medicine I've left. Send for me immediately if his breathing worsens again." As he prepares to leave, Jamie stirs more definitively, his eyes opening partially, unfocused but undeniably conscious. "Thirsty," he whispers, the first coherent word he's spoken since the crisis deepened. Your mother is beside him instantly, helping him sip water, tears streaming silently down her face, tears of relief, of hope cautiously embraced, of exhaustion finally finding release. The doctor pauses at the door, watching this scene with an expression caught between professional satisfaction and personal emotion. "He's young," he says quietly to your father, "strong despite everything. If he's made it this far," he doesn't finish the thought, but the message is clear. Hope is justified now, not just desperate wishful thinking. After he leaves, the room seems both emptier and lighter, missing his authoritative presence, but freed from the tension of performing poverty with dignity for outside eyes. Your mother sings softly to Jamie as she feeds him more water. Your father allows himself to sit, finally, the strain of the night visible in his slumped shoulders and lined face. "We should try to sleep," he says, though it's midday. "Take turns watching him." No one argues. The night's vigil has drained everyone, and sleep has been scarce and fragmented for days. You volunteer for the first watch, settling beside Jamie's bed, while the others find spaces on the floor, exhaustion quickly claiming them despite the uncomfortable arrangements. Jamie looks at you through half-closed eyes, recognition flickering. "Did I..." he begins, his voice a whisper. "Did I nearly die?" The direct question, so typical of children's unfiltered perception, catches you off guard. "You were very sick," you answer carefully, "but you're getting better now." He seems to consider this, his fever-bright eyes more aware than they've been in days. "I heard you all," he says. "Even when I couldn't open my eyes. I heard everyone talking." This simple statement, that even in the depths of illness he maintained some connection to the world, to his family, feels profound. Winter tries to isolate, to separate, to break connections, but human bonds persist even through its worst assaults. "Rest now," you tell him, smoothing back his damp hair. "Just focus on getting stronger." Outside, the snow has stopped completely. Weak winter sunlight breaks through the clouds, sending beams of light through the window to create patterns on the worn floorboards. In the street below, voices can be heard, neighbours calling to each other, comparing stories of the storm, beginning the work of clearing paths. London is emerging from the snow's temporary halting of normal life, returning to its rhythms of survival. Your family too is emerging from the crisis that nearly claimed its youngest member. Not safe, not secure, winter still holds the city in its grip. Poverty still constrains your options. Disease still threatens. But for this moment, in this room, with Jamie's breathing easing and his fever reducing, there is a pause in the constant battle, a moment of grace in winter's siege. The afternoon passes in a rhythm of small improvements. Jamie takes more broth. His fever drops further. His breathing, while still laboured, loses the desperate quality that signalled imminent danger. Your family moves around the sickbed with cautious optimism, daring to believe in recovery while still bracing for setbacks. Outside, London digs itself out from under the snow. The sounds of shovels scraping against pavement drift up from the street, along with calls and occasional laughter, as the shared task of clearing paths creates temporary community among neighbours who might otherwise barely acknowledge each other. Your father wakes from his brief sleep with renewed determination. "I should check if the carter needs help," he says, pulling on his boots. "After yesterday's work, he might expect us, and we need the money more than ever now." The medical crisis has depleted both your physical and financial reserves. The coal used to maintain the higher temperature, the special foods needed for Jamie's recovery, the pennies given to the doctor, all necessary expenses, but all draining the fragile security your family had begun to build. "The roads will still be bad," your mother cautions, "and your hand is well enough for work," he interrupts, flexing the injured fingers with only a slight wince. "We can't afford for it not to be." This simple truth, that poverty allows no real recovery time, that injuries must be worked through, pain ignored, is so fundamental to your existence that it hardly needs stating, but the storm has added new urgency, new desperation to the equation. "I'll come too," you offer, already reaching for your coat. Your father hesitates, glancing at Jamie. "Someone should stay in case he worsens again." "I can manage," your mother says firmly. "Emma will help. You two bring back what we need." What remains unspoken? If Jamie takes a turn for the worse, there's little more that can be done without the doctor anyway, and the need for income is immediate, pressing. The street, when you emerge, is both familiar and transformed. Snow piled in drifts against buildings, narrow paths carved through where people have begun to move about, icicles hanging from eaves like crystal decorations. In wealthy districts, such scenes might look charming, picturesque. Here, the beauty is overshadowed by practical dangers. Ice that means falls and broken bones, snow that means wet feet and pneumonia, paths too narrow for deliveries of coal or food. Half the city will be shut down today, your father observes as you make your way carefully through the slush. Shops closed, deliveries halted. Bad for business, good for labourers, you suggest. They'll need extra hands to clear all this. Your father nods, always quick to see opportunity in difficulty. Might be better wages than the usual, if we can find the right spots. This is winter strategy for the working poor, knowing where to be when, understanding which emergencies translate to temporary work opportunities, being flexible enough to turn from one job to another as conditions change. The butcher shop, when you reach it, is indeed closed to customers. A sign on the front door announcing, "No deliveries today due to weather." But activity at the back entrance tells a different story. The butcher himself and several men are clearing snow from the delivery area, creating access for when supplies eventually resume. "Clark," the butcher calls when he spots your father. "Good timing, need strong backs today." The work is simple but exhausting, shoveling snow for hours, clearing not just the delivery area but the paths to the shop front and the adjacent street. The cold makes every movement an effort, muscles stiffening, breath burning in lungs, but the pay offered is better than usual. Emergency rates, the butcher calls it, and there's the unspoken promise of continuing work with the delivery cart once roads are passable again. By midday, other labourers have joined the effort, and the butcher sends several of you to help clear paths for neighbouring businesses. The baker, the greengrocer, the tobacconist. Each pays a small amount, the coins accumulating in your pocket, providing a weight of security that makes the back-breaking work worthwhile. "Heard about your boy," the baker says quietly to your father as you finish clearing his front step. "Mrs. Higgins mentioned it when she came for bread this morning. How's he faring?" "Better," your father replies, the single word containing both relief and lingering worry. "Doctor stayed the night. Says he's turned a corner." The baker nods, understanding the unspoken fear that still underlies the cautious hope. "My youngest had the lung fever 2 winters back," he says, his eyes distant with memory. "Thought we'd lose him for certain. Now he's apprenticed in Chelsea, strong as an ox." This sharing of survival stories is another part of winter's culture among the working class. Not empty reassurance, but evidence-based hope, reminders that others have faced similar trials and emerged intact. The baker disappears into his shop, returning with a small loaf wrapped in cloth. "Day old," he says, handing it to your father. "Can't sell it anyway with the weather keeping customers home. Might help the boy's strength. Like the butcher's discount on meat, this is not pure charity," which might offend pride, but business pragmatism softened with human concern. Your father accepts with a nod of thanks, tucking the bread carefully inside his coat where it won't get damp from the snow. By late afternoon, exhaustion is setting in. Hours of shoveling in the cold have left both you and your father trembling with fatigue, fingers numb despite constant movement, feet soaked inside inadequate boots. But the combined earnings from the day's work are substantial by your standards. Enough for coal, food, and still some to set aside for tomorrow's needs. "We should head back," your father says, studying the darkening sky. "Storm's blown out, but night's still dangerous with all this ice. The walk home seems longer than usual, your tired legs protesting each step, the cold finding new ways to penetrate clothing already damp from exertion and melted snow. But there's satisfaction in the weight of coins in your pocket, in the bread tucked safely away, in having found work when so many others might be idle due to the storm." The neighbourhood appears different as you approach, not just from the snow, which is now trampled and dirty along the main paths, but from a subtle shift in activity. People gather in small groups outside buildings, voices raised in what might be argument or might be excitement. hard to tell from a distance. "Something's happened," your father says, quickening his pace despite his exhaustion. As you draw closer, Mrs. Higgins detaches from one such group, hurrying toward you with unusual animation in her normally stoic face. "You haven't heard," she calls. "The pipe burst, damaged Collins's ceiling so badly it collapsed. The landlord's been forced to call in repairs for the whole building." This news, unexpected, almost unbelievable, takes a moment to process. Repairs to tenement buildings are rare, landlords typically patching problems in the cheapest possible manner or simply ignoring them until they become truly dangerous. A collapsed ceiling, however, can't be ignored. It threatens the structural integrity of the whole building, and even the most negligent landlord can't risk the complete loss of a property. "They're checking all the rooms," Mrs. Higgins continues as you reach her, looking for other weak spots, and the parish officer came with them, said it wasn't fit habitation with the water pipes still broken. "Parish officer?" Your father's expression darkens. Parish involvement often means unwanted attention, judgments about living conditions that could lead to children being removed to workhouses or families evicted for unhealthy living. Mrs. Higgins senses his concern. "Don't worry, he's one of the better ones, more focused on making the landlord fix things than on moving people out." She lowers her voice. "Between us, I think he's got it in for Mr. Phillips after that business last winter with the Thompson family freezing to death in one of his other buildings." This reference to a tragedy you remember well, a mother and two small children found frozen in their room after the landlord refused to repair a broken window, puts the current situation in perspective. Sometimes official intervention, while risky, is the only force that can compel landlords to maintain even minimally safe conditions. "Have they been to our floor yet?" you ask, thinking of your mother and siblings alone in the room, Jamie still recovering. "Working their way up," Mrs. Higgins replies. "Started at the ground where the worst damage is. They should reach you by evening." Your father nods his thanks for the information, then continues toward the building entrance, his pace quickening despite his fatigue. You follow close behind, both of you navigating around clusters of displaced residents, workers carrying tools, and the general chaos of unexpected activity in a normally neglected building. Inside, the stairwell is busier than you've ever seen it, children running up and down, enjoying the novelty of something happening, adults gathering on landings to exchange information and speculation, workers in caps and rough clothes moving purposefully between floors with toolboxes and materials. When you reach your room, you find your mother standing in the doorway, watching a parish officer and the landlord, Mr. Phillips, examine the ceiling near your window, where water damage has created an ominous dark stain. Emma sits beside Jamie's bed, positioned protectively between the visitors and her sick brother. "Ah, Mr. Clark," the landlord says, his tone artificially pleasant, the voice he uses when official eyes are watching. "Just explaining to your good wife that repairs will be necessary throughout the building. This ceiling shows significant water damage." The parish officer, a thin man with a ledger and pencil, nods in agreement. "Unsafe conditions," he pronounces, making a note. "Repairs to be completed within the week per housing ordinance requirements." This formal language, ordinance requirements, is both threatening to the landlord and reassuring to you. It means official record of the problems, documentation that can be used to enforce actual repairs rather than the cosmetic patches Mr. Phillips typically provides. "The water pipes?" your father asks, addressing the question to the officer rather than the landlord. "Plumber arrives tomorrow. the officer replies, still writing in his ledger. Temporary measures tonight, water barrels on each floor, full replacement of damaged sections to begin at first light. These specific commitments, noted in an official record, are worth more than any casual promise from Mr. Phillips, whose word alone has proven worthless in the past. The landlord's face shows poorly concealed resentment. Each repair represents expense, each official order a challenge to his usual practice of minimal maintenance, but with the parish officer present he can only nod agreement, his usual bluster replaced by forced cooperation. We'll need to move the sick child, the officer adds, noticing Jamie for the first time. Construction dust isn't good for lung complaints. Your mother stiffens. He can't be moved, she says firmly. Doctor's orders, he's just beginning to recover. A standoff threatens. The impersonal requirements of building repairs versus the immediate medical needs of a sick child. The officer frowns, consulting his ledger as though it might contain a solution to this unexpected complication. Before he can respond, a new voice enters the conversation from the doorway. Perhaps I can be of assistance. The doctor has returned as promised, his coat still dusted with snow, his bag in hand. His presence immediately changes the dynamic in the small room, his professional status giving him authority that even the parish officer respects. Medical necessity must take precedence, he says, moving to Jamie's bedside and checking his pulse with practiced efficiency. The boy has pneumonia, severe enough to require constant monitoring. Moving him would pose significant risk. The parish officer hesitates, caught between competing official requirements. The ceiling repairs can surely be scheduled around one room, the doctor suggests smoothly, or perhaps completed with extra precautions to minimize dust. I'd be happy to provide a formal medical exemption if necessary. This offer, to use his professional authority to create an official exception, resolves the immediate tension. The parish officer makes a note in his ledger. The landlord looks relieved at finding a solution that doesn't require confrontation with either the parish or the doctor, and your mother's rigid posture relaxes slightly. We'll move to this room last, the parish officer decides, and require the workers to take special precautions. Doctor, if you could provide that exemption document by tomorrow. The doctor nods agreement, and the matter is settled. The officer and landlord move on to the next dwelling, leaving your family alone with the doctor. Perfect timing, your father says with genuine gratitude. Wasn't sure how to handle that without causing trouble. The doctor shrugs off the thanks, already focused on examining Jamie. How has he been since this morning? Better, your mother reports. Taking broth, fever down, breathing easier, even spoke a little. The doctor nods, satisfaction evident as he listens to Jamie's chest. Definite improvement, he confirms. The fluid is decreasing. His body is fighting effectively now. Relief washes through the room, almost tangible in its intensity. The cautious hope of the morning solidifies into stronger confidence, not certainty. Nothing about winter illness is ever certain, but genuine belief that recovery rather than loss is the likely outcome. So what happens now? Emma asks, practical as always. With the repairs, I mean. The question brings focus back to the unexpected development. Actual maintenance on a building typically left to slow decay, actual enforcement of housing standards normally ignored in the slums. They'll fix the ceilings and water pipes, your father explains. Moving from room to room. We'll be last because of Jamie, but eventually they'll need access here too. The doctor, finishing his examination of Jamie, rejoins the conversation. I'll ensure they take appropriate precautions when they reach this room, and by then he should be stronger anyway. He packs his instruments back into his bag. I've brought more medicine. A tonic to rebuild strength once the acute infection passes, and something for pain if he needs it. These continuing small kindnesses, special medicines, professional intervention with authorities, attention beyond the minimum required, remain surprising. Not all parish doctors are cold or negligent, certainly, but few invest themselves so personally in slum families who cannot offer payment or professional advancement in return. After the doctor leaves, your family settles into evening routines transformed by both crisis and unexpected hope. The bread from the baker and meat purchased with the day's earnings make a substantial meal by your standards. The fire burns well, fueled by coal bought with the same wages. Jamie sits propped up for the first time in days, taking small bites of food, his eyes clearer, his breathing easier. Outside, the sounds of repair work continue despite the gathering darkness, an unprecedented urgency in addressing problems typically left to worsen until they became truly dangerous. The disruption of normal patterns, workers in the building after dark, barrels of water being positioned in hallways, neighbours gathering to discuss the sudden attention to long-ignored issues, creates an atmosphere almost of celebration. Never thought I'd see Phillips forced to fix anything properly, your father comments, satisfaction evident in his voice. Must have cost someone important money for them to send a parish officer out in this weather. Mrs. Higgins thinks it was the Thompson tragedy, you remind him. Put pressure on the parish to enforce regulations. Your father nods slowly. Poor family. Terrible way to go. He stares into the fire for a moment, perhaps thinking how close your own family came to a similar fate with Jamie's illness. At least some good might come of it. Better pipes, safer ceilings. This is the cruel calculus of slum improvement. Progress often comes only after tragedy, safety standards enforced only after preventable deaths. Not justice, not real reform, but small steps forward purchased with others' suffering. As evening deepens into night, a knock at the door reveals Mrs. Higgins again, this time accompanied by her oldest son, Tom, carrying a small crate. Water barrels been set up on the landing, she announces. Tom and I filled these for you, save you the trip. The crate contains several jugs of clean water, enough for drinking and basic washing until morning. You shouldn't have, your mother begins, the ritual protest. Nonsense, Mrs. Higgins cuts her off with the same brisk efficiency as before. Your boy needs rest, not you trudging up and down for water. She peers across the room to where Jamie sits propped against pillows. Looking better already, that doctor must know his business after all. Tom, a lanky boy of about 16, shifts awkwardly beside his mother. Got something else too, he says, reaching into his pocket. He produces a small wooden figure, roughly carved but recognizable as a boat. Made it while I was stuck inside during the storm. Thought Jamie might like it when he's feeling up to playing again. This gift, handmade, requiring precious time and effort, represents a different kind of generosity than shared food or water, not necessity but kindness, attention to the human need for more than mere survival. Jamie's face lights up at the sight, his first genuine smile in days. For me? He asks. Voice still weak but animated with interest. It's brilliant. The small moment of joy, a sick child delighting in a simple toy, neighbours extending kindness beyond practical necessity, humanity flourishing even in the harshest conditions, feels like victory against winter's grinding assault, not just surviving, but living, finding moments of connection and pleasure despite everything. After Mrs. Higgins and Tom leave, promising to check in again tomorrow, your family prepares for night. The improved fire, better food, and Jamie's visible recovery create an atmosphere almost of normalcy, as though the crisis has passed, the worst averted. Should we use some coal to heat water for washing? Emma suggests, a luxury rarely considered in winter when fuel is precious and cold water torture. Your mother hesitates, practical concerns warring with the desire to celebrate Jamie's improvement with some small comfort. Your father makes the decision, reaching for the bucket. "We've earned it," he says simply. "One small pot, just enough for faces and hands." This modest indulgence, warm water instead of icy, the chance to truly clean away the grime of days spent in snow and coal dust and sickroom worry, feels extravagant, almost decadent. You each take turns at the small basin, sighing with pleasure at the simple comfort of warmth against skin, the strange luxury of cleanliness in winter. Jamie watches these preparations from his bed, still too weak to join but visibly stronger than the day before. "When I'm better," he announces, "I'm going to wash my whole self, head to feet." The declaration, so ordinary in summer, so outrageous in winter, makes everyone laugh. The sound strange and welcome in a room that has held only tense whispers and laboured breathing for days. "Ambitious," your father teases, "but let's start with standing up on your own first, young man." As night fully claims the city, the noise of repair work finally ceases. The building settles into unusual quiet, not the typical sounds of too many lives pressed too closely together, but a hush that seems almost peaceful. Perhaps everyone is simply exhausted by the storm, the crisis, the unexpected activity. Or perhaps there's a collective holding of breath, a community-wide pause to acknowledge averted disaster, both Jamie's recovery and the forced repairs representing rare victories against winter's assault. Sleep comes more easily tonight, your body surrendering to the exhaustion of shoveling snow for hours, your mind relaxing its vigilance now that Jamie's breathing flows more normally, his fever reduced to manageable levels. Even your dreams are gentler, not the usual winter nightmares of freezing or hunger, but vague, pleasant images of spring, of warmth, of easier days ahead. You wake briefly in the night, confused at first by what disturbed your sleep. Then you identify it. Silence. Jamie's breathing, which has provided constant background noise for days, rasping, rattling, gasping, has quieted to near normal rhythm. In the dim firelight, you can see his chest rising and falling easily, his face relaxed in genuine sleep rather than fever-induced unconsciousness. This simple observation, a child breathing normally, fills you with profound gratitude. Not religious exactly, but something close. Appreciation for whatever combination of the doctor's skill, your family's care, and simple human resilience has brought Jamie back from the edge of winter's abyss. Outside, snow begins falling again, lightly this time, decorative rather than dangerous, adding fresh white to the dirty piles left from the storm. The temperature has risen slightly, the bitter edge gone from the air, the wind softer against the windows. Not spring, not even a true thaw, but a gentler face of winter, a reminder that even this harshest of seasons has moments of beauty, of relenting, of grace. You drift back to sleep thinking of the carved wooden boat, the warm water for washing, the repairs that will make the building safer, the doctor who stayed through the night, the neighbours who shared what little they had. None of these things eliminates the fundamental cruelty of winter, poverty, the constant cold, the inadequate food, the looming threat of illness or injury that could tip precarious survival into disaster. but together they create something like hope. Not the naive optimism of those who have never truly suffered, but the hard-won, clear-eyed hope of those who have faced winter's worst and found themselves still standing, still breathing, still human despite everything. Morning brings weak sunlight through partly cloudy skies, the storm system finally moving on, leaving behind a transformed London, snow-covered but functioning, damaged but recovering, much like Jamie himself. The sounds of repair work resume early, men's voices calling to each other as they move equipment, the rasp of saws, the bang of hammers. Normally such noise would be irritating, unwelcome. Today it sounds almost like music, the soundtrack of improvement, of problems being addressed rather than ignored, of a system briefly working as it should. Jamie wakes with the noise, blinking confusion at the unfamiliar sounds. "What's happening?" he asks, voice stronger than yesterday, eyes more alert. "They're fixing the building," Emma tells him, helping him sit up against the pillows. "Water pipes, ceilings, everything because of the storm." "Our ceiling too?" he asks, looking up at the water stain that's been growing for months, ignored by the landlord, despite repeated complaints. "Eventually," you confirm, "though they're saving our room for last, so you can rest and get stronger first." He considers this information with the seriousness children often apply to adult matters. "Good," he decides finally. "I want to watch them fix it, learn how it works." This simple expression of curiosity, of interest in the world beyond illness and survival, feels like the clearest sign yet of his recovery. Not just breathing easier or fever reducing, but the return of the essential Jamie, curious, engaged, thinking beyond the immediate moment. Your father, preparing to leave for another day of snow-clearing work, pauses to ruffle Jamie's hair gently. "I'll bring you something to draw with," he promises. "You can make plans for how the ceiling should look." This small indulgence, pencil and paper, normally too expensive for anything but essential communication, is another celebration of recovery, another acknowledgement that survival requires more than just the absolute necessities. Beauty, creativity, play, these too are human needs, all the more precious for being rare in winter poverty. As your father leaves, Jamie calls after him, "Bring stories too about what you see today." The request, so normal, so childlike, so far from the desperate gasping of days before, brings unexpected tears to your mother's eyes. She turns away quickly, busying herself at the fire, but you catch the moment of overwhelming relief, of gratitude so intense it can't be contained. Winter in Victorian London remains brutal. The snow will melt to slush, then freeze again to treacherous ice. Coal will again become scarce. Food prices will rise as supplies dwindle. Illness will claim other victims in crowded tenements. The repairs forced by the storm and parish intervention will fix immediate dangers but not address the fundamental problems of poverty, inequality and indifference that make every winter a season of survival rather than merely a change in weather. But for this moment, in this room, with Jamie breathing easily and repair work promising slightly better conditions, winter's siege has been pushed back. Not defeated, never truly defeated until spring, but temporarily held at bay by human resilience, community support, medical skill, and the small, crucial kindnesses that make survival possible. Outside, children have begun to play in the snow despite the cold, their laughter drifting up from the street below. The sound seems to draw Jamie like a magnet. He struggles to sit up straighter, to see out the window from his bed. "When can I go outside again?" he asks, watching the children with longing. "Not for some time yet," your mother replies firmly. "You're still recovering." He accepts this with only a small sigh of disappointment. "Will you tell me about it then?" he asks, turning to you. what it looks like out there, all the snow and everything. You move to the window, looking out at the transformed street, the playing children, the workers clearing paths, the neighbours exchanging news and assistance, the complex web of human activity that continues despite winter's best efforts to halt it. It's beautiful in a way, you begin, trying to find words to describe the strange, harsh beauty of a London winter to a child too sick to see it himself. Everything covered in white, icicles hanging like glass decorations, the sun making the snow sparkle when it breaks through the clouds. The next week passes in a rhythm of gradual improvement, both for Jamie and for your building. Each day brings small victories, Jamie sitting up longer, taking more food, colour returning to his previously pale face. The repair work progresses floor by floor, the sounds of hammers and saws becoming familiar background noise, almost comforting in what they represent, actual maintenance instead of dangerous neglect. Your father continues finding work clearing snow, then returns to helping the butcher's delivery cart once the main roads are passable again. The wages aren't consistent, but are enough to keep coal in the grate and food on the table. Your mother takes in mending from neighbours who can spare a few pennies, working by the improved firelight while keeping watch over Jamie. Emma returns to her previous job at a match factory, though she negotiates shorter hours to be home more while Jamie recovers. The parish doctor visits every other day, each time noting improvement, gradually reducing medicines as they become unnecessary. "He's young," the doctor remarks during one such visit, watching Jamie actually laugh at something Emma has said, a sound unimaginable during the worst of his illness. Children recover remarkably when given proper care. The unspoken compliment that your family provided such care despite nearly impossible circumstances hangs in the air between him and your mother. Professional distance has softened over the course of Jamie's illness, creating something not quite friendship, but more than the typical relationship between parish doctor and slum patient. "We were lucky you came that night," your mother says simply. The words contain multitudes, gratitude, acknowledgement of how differently things might have gone, recognition that many children in similar circumstances don't receive such attention. The doctor shakes his head slightly. "Not luck. Your son's determination to fetch help despite the storm." He nods toward you, a rare direct acknowledgement. Many would have waited until morning. By then, he doesn't finish the sentence, doesn't need to. By morning, Jamie might have been beyond help. These small exchanges, recognition of mutual humanity across vast social divides, represent tiny cracks in the rigid class structure that defines Victorian London. Not enough to create true equality or justice, but enough to remind everyone involved that people exist on both sides of the divide, not just statistics or stereotypes. On the day the repair crew finally reaches your room, Jamie is well enough to sit in a chair wrapped in blankets, watching with fascinated eyes as workers replace the damaged section of ceiling. The landlord, Mr. Phillips, supervises with clear reluctance, each repair representing expense he'd have avoided if possible. Necessary maintenance, the crew foreman keeps reminding him, loud enough for all to hear. Parish has it all documented now, can't be putting it off anymore. This public shaming, forcing a landlord to acknowledge responsibilities typically ignored, provides a small sense of justice to tenants accustomed to living with dangerous conditions while paying rent they can barely afford. Not revolution, not true reform, but a momentary balancing of power that feels significant despite its limitations.